Hey guys. Here is what if Naruto chose freedom over the village. These are two stories. The first one and its sequel. A secret that everyone knows isn't much of a secret. Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's unknown prodigy, independently uncovers the reason why his village despises his existence. Then he decides to do something about it. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Konoha Market District. 7 years after the Kyuubi's defeat, 634th year of the Sage. Seated at a table in an open-air cafe, situated near the middle of Konohagakure's commercial areas, there sat a completely ordinary man, black hair, brown eyes, mid-30s, and no outstanding characteristics, calmly sipping his tea and seemingly enjoying a pleasant day. He was also waiting for something. He should be passing by any second now. I don't think this will reveal anything unexpected, but it would be nice to know for sure. I deserve that much. Just as he anticipated, the crowd began to stir over the next few seconds, smiling faces giving way to barely restrained hostility. The cause of this hostility soon became evident: a 7-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, making his way down the street. And here we go, thought the perfectly ordinary man, directing a cold glare towards the boy that he didn't truly mean. Time to poke this with a stick and see what happens. Kyuubi, he uttered, voicing the word just loud enough for the people closest to him to hear. Sure enough, the word attracted some attention. Hey buddy, the male patron at the nearest table chimed in. Don't say that too loud. You know the law. I do now, mused the man, as he watched the boy turn the next corner and disappear. Outwardly, he scoffed. Sorry about that. It's just... No need to tell us. The second man's female companion joining the conversation. So many dead, and the Hokage just lets him run loose like there's no danger at all. The ordinary man made a sound of agreement, before returning to his tea. So I was right. I was really hoping that it wasn't true. That's gonna be a real pain in the ass to deal with. The patrons at the next table had no idea that they had just spilled an S-class secret to the one person they least wanted to tell. But there was no way they could have known. Not a soul in Konoha, other than Naruto himself, was aware that he had mastered the Kage Bunshin technique. None of the other customers of the cafe realized that the Naruto they had just been glaring at was nothing more than a chakra construct. They would never know that the nondescript man drinking his tea was none other than a henge Naruto. Office of the Hokage. 2 weeks earlier. Naruto was an incredibly intelligent child, but it didn't take a genius to see that there was something horribly wrong with the way the people of Konoha were treating him. The whispered comments, the hateful stares, the parents who told their children that they shouldn't play with him, that he was bad. It couldn't have been his physical appearance. Sure, blue eyes and blonde hair were very rare traits in Fire Country, but the Yondaime Hokage had the same features, and that hadn't stopped people from speaking of him with reverence. Naruto had his ideas regarding the rather obvious resemblance, but resolved to ponder that later. The only truly weird part of his physical appearance were his whisker-shaped birthmarks, but that alone could never explain the rampant hostility. Konoha loved its bloodline clans, and several of them had features that were far more unusual. But if appearance didn't explain anything, it seemed even less likely that they hated him for something he did. The village's enmity had been directed at him for as long as he could remember, and he couldn't imagine a baby doing something that would piss off tens of thousands of people. It wasn't his looks, and it wasn't anything he did, so he seemed to be at an impasse. Asking around hadn't helped. No matter how much the people hated him, they would always clam up and refuse to say why, without exception. Even the handful of people who treated him with decency would refuse to say anything and immediately change the subject. And he would let them, because he didn't want anyone finding out just how smart he was. The reason he had decided on that policy was simple. Naruto, despite or perhaps because of his social isolation, was very good at reading people's emotions. And underlying all the hatred directed at him, he could sense something else buried deep. Fear. They were actually afraid of him. He, who had done nothing to hurt anyone. He, who would be hard-pressed to take down a single average genin, despite his talent for the ninja arts. And that fear caused him to fear the people of the village in turn. If they feared him, it meant they saw him as a threat. Konoha was a military outpost at its core, and soldiers were trained to eliminate threats. For his own safety, he had to somehow be seen as less of a threat. And the only feasible way to do that, considering he was already a small child, was to make himself seem like a moron. Not too dumb, of course. The Hokage, one of the few people who liked him, might have sought professional help for him if he had seemed like a literal retard, and he wasn't confident that his acting skills would fool an expert. So he was merely dense, and easily distracted when people changed subjects every time he asked unpleasant questions. The act seemed to make people breathe easy, precisely as he had intended. But that left him with only one lead to follow, the complex seal on his stomach that formed every time he molded chakra. Naruto was something of a bookworm, written words being less biased against him than people, so it didn't take long for him to figure out that the odd-looking tattoo was a seal, even if he couldn't tell what it did. And from some of his previous reading, namely history and mythology, he knew that bijou could be sealed into people. The Sage of Six Paths, discoverer of chakra and father of ninjutsu, became the very first example when he sealed the jubi inside of himself before splitting it. Naruto also knew that his birthday was the same day that the Kyuubi had attacked Konoha and been killed by the Yondaime Hokage. And since the sage himself hadn't been able to destroy the bijou, Naruto was reasonably confident that the official story was bullshit. That seemed to leave only one unpleasant possibility, but he didn't want to believe it without proof, and no one was going to just tell him. It was fortunate, then, that his false stupidity opened doors that would have otherwise remained closed. He had been visiting the Hokage, asking silly questions about his job and generally playing the innocent, somewhat dim, child, when the old man had been called away on some urgent business. Sarutobi had honestly expected to be done soon, and had permitted Naruto to remain in his office unsupervised so long as he promised not to make a mess. Part of his campaign to seem less threatening was to be honest to a fault, lies of omission notwithstanding, and anyone who gave him half a chance knew that he always kept his word. Since the guards were only posted on the outside of the doors, it was a golden opportunity to do some snooping. He grinned widely the moment the doors were shut. Well, that was stupid of them. You shouldn't leave people unsupervised in the Hokage's office, even if it's just a kid. I mean, haven't some people graduated the academy younger than I am now? Attached to the Hokage's office was a room containing various sensitive materials. Materials that people weren't supposed to look at without the Hokage's consent. Too bad Naruto had little respect for rules on a good day. Now if I was a dirty little secret about the most hated person in the village, where would I be? His excitement quickly dampened after a few minutes. Apparently, the village really did store its dirty laundry somewhere more secure, as there seemed to be no sign of any records regarding secret village activities, or the like. The main object of interest seemed to be something called the Forbidden Scroll, and Naruto wasn't really interested in the sort of suicidal jutsu that would most likely be contained within. On the other hand, I really don't want to leave this room empty-handed after all that. Maybe a peek wouldn't hurt. The child carefully removed it from its pedestal, careful not to disturb anything else in the room, and proceeded to unroll it. He was right about the majority of the techniques within, unfortunately. It was amazing how many different ways ninja had come up with to kill themselves along with their enemies. But the very first jutsu on the list, the only one he came back to, was one that showed much more promise. Kage Bunshin? Sounds annoying. Regular Bunshin are hard enough to make as it is. Except, high chakra cost and minimal control requirement, one hand seal only. I suck at regular Bunshin because I overload them, so this could make a good replacement. High probability of killing self by chakra exhaustion. I'll start with one at a time to be safe, but if I'm right about myself, that won't be a problem. Fully independent clones identical to user? Having extra pairs of hands could be useful. Memories acquired by clones during lifetime returned to user. His eyes went wide. Slowly, the grin he'd had at the start of this venture returned. This is pretty fucking awesome, I'll admit. Now I just need to memorize the instructions. Kind of a funky looking hand seal, but there's just one to remember. He carefully made his hands into a cross shape, mimicking the image on the scroll. He also made sure to double-check the description of how his chakra was supposed to flow, but it was all remarkably simple, even compared to the basic academy jutsu he had already learned. And now I just need to put this back where I found it, blow this joint, and train my ass off until I have it down. He hadn't found the information he'd been looking for. But what he had found were instructions to the ultimate espionage jutsu, and he'd be damned if he didn't use it to puzzle out the truth. With the ability to be in many places at once, he'd infiltrate his own village and confirm what they were hiding from him. After all, a secret that everyone knows isn't much of a secret. He'd just have to come up with a different approach to get it out in the open. Naruto's apartment. Present day. Naruto, having dropped his disguise and dispelled his clone, entered his apartment to think about his situation and plot his next move. Moving on autopilot, he set some water to boil and pulled a cup of ramen from the cabinet. Okay, so I know I have the Kyuubi inside me. Why does everyone else know? Whose bright idea was it to tell everyone? Hey, remember that demon that just attacked? It's sealed inside this baby. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Please treat him like shit for his entire life. I mean, it's supposedly a big secret that I'm not supposed to know about, but if every adult in the village knows. The water started boiling, and he absent-mindedly poured it into the cup of ramen. I mean, I read that Jinchuriki could access the biju's power, and that ninja villages sometimes use them as weapons. So why announce to everyone who your secret weapon is? Son of a bitch! He expressed out loud. As he waited for his ramen to cook, and his thoughts took a darker turn, his eyebrows started twitching in irritation. He wasn't sure which was causing it. It was never supposed to be a secret, was it? The QB supposedly just appeared out of nowhere, but something that big doesn't just sneak up on a village full of ninja. Maybe there was someone before me, a Jinchuriki who was supposed to use the QB for Konoha, but something happened and that person let it loose in the middle of the village. There was no way in hell they could hide the QB's attack from foreign ninja, but they couldn't let Konoha's enemies think we were easy pickings. His ramen had finally finished cooking, and he eagerly dug in. His twitching ceased as soon as he began indulging in his comfort food. A secret that everyone knows isn't much of a secret. If I could figure it out, so could any spies among us. The old man needed Konoha's enemies to know we still had the QB under control. Either that or he was really incompetent enough to assume everyone would be accepting of me, and I don't think he's incompetent. Upset by his newest revelation, he smashed his fist against the table. Damn it, old man! I want to like you, but you're making it really difficult. He sighed, and continued eating. So what else is he hiding from me? If I'm supposed to be some super weapon, it's hard to believe that no one would know where I came from or who my parents were. Uzumaki is the name of that dead clan that used to be real close allies with Konoha. I doubt I was given that name just because someone thought it would be funny. And let's not forget that the guy responsible for my situation looks an awful lot like me. 50 Ryo says he's my father. Fucking deadbeat sealed the demon in me, then had the nerve to die and leave me alone. He sighed again. It seemed to be turning into a habit today. Even if it's true, I doubt there's any proof. Can't have the people finding out that the child they love to hate is their hero's son, after all. That might upset them. Having finally finished his ramen, he expertly tossed the cup into the nearest trash can. Let's start with the easy part then. I'm an Uzumaki, and there couldn't have been many left. I doubt they would go so far as to erase them from the records. It would have been much easier to hide any relationship by giving me a different name. So if I have a look at the public records, I should find my mother there. He glanced out the window at the darkening sky. But first, I need some sleep. It's getting close to bedtime. Konoha Public Record Depository. The next day. The following day found Naruto poring over unclassified records, cloaked in a henge. Not that his business here was illegal or anything, he just didn't want anyone thinking he was smart. And there was no telling how the powers that be would react if they realized just how many of his secrets he was uncovering. That's why he wasn't really there to begin with. Even if someone realized he was delving into sensitive matters, there just wasn't any feasible way to capture and interrogate a Kage Bunshin. Naruto had honestly expected much more difficulty with finding his mother. Considering Konohagakure and Uzushio had been close allies, he'd expected to see a lot more Uzumaki refugees scattered throughout the paper trail to make his search more difficult. It seemed not many had made it to Konoha. By the time of the QB's attack, there had only been one living Uzumaki registered as a citizen, someone who had died that same day, one Uzumaki Kushina. And just from looking at her picture, Naruto knew this woman was his mother. I've seen that face so many times before, every time I look in the mirror. Give me long, red hair, and we could almost pass as twins. And here I thought I looked like the Yondaime. Excited to learn more, he continued reading, only to laugh at what he saw. Husband, classified? Children, classified? What kind of sloppy attempt at censorship is this? You don't hide them by saying she's got them. Whoever's in charge of information security needs a swift kick in the ass. Pretty convenient for me, though. But did they seriously believe that the orphan named Uzumaki would never think to look here for more Uzumaki? If I had any doubts about who Daddy was, they just went bye-bye. There were plenty more chunks of blocked-out information, though he didn't know enough to be able to infer their meaning. It was to be expected for a high-level ninja, though, and he'd already gotten what he most wanted from the file. Naruto took one last, lingering look at the picture before closing the record book and standing up to put it back in its rightful place. As much fun as it is to wonder what could have been, they're both dead and gone. I'm alive, I'm surrounded by a village that hates me, and there's no way the old man will just let me walk away from it when I'm supposed to be his super scary ultimate weapon. So how am I going to deal with this mess I was born into? The Kage Bunshin dispersed in a puff of smoke, relaying his findings to the original. No evidence of Naruto's presence remained. Naruto's apartment. 2 days later. Sitting on his unmade bed, in a vaguely meditative position, Naruto once more found himself considering the enormity of the problem he faced. If I stay, I'll be hated. These assholes don't even seem to believe I'm human. I'd probably have to single-handedly save the village in front of hundreds of witnesses before I'd manage to get any respect out of them. But I can't just ditch this place, because I'll be hunted if I leave. If other nations found out about me, they'd hunt me too. So how am I supposed to have a happy life? He gazed down at his shirtless torso, and at the seal that showed itself as he molded his chakra. It all comes down to you, doesn't it? I'm stuck with you, and that rules my entire life. You're attached to my chakra network, so even if I knew how to unlock a seal like this, it would probably kill me. Can't have weapons deciding they don't want to fight anymore, huh? That would just be silly. He took a moment to yawn and stretch, before adopting a pensive look. I can't believe I'm considering this, but I need your help. I don't even know if there's more to you than a mindless animal. But if there is, give me a sign. You're the only one who might side with me on this. You're the only hope I've got. Naruto had no reason to believe the Bijou could hear his words, so he continued experimenting with his chakra. In waves and pulses, he sent it in the direction of the seal, attempting to make some sort of contact with the eldritch power embedded within. Nothing. But that didn't make any sense. The seal was more than just for storage. Jinchuriki would be pointless unless there was an intersection of human and Bijou, some way for them to interact. How else could a Jinchuriki draw upon the Bijou's strength? If anything, overwhelming the seal with his own chakra seemed to be diminishing the feeling of power he got from the seal. Desperate and out of options, Naruto did the opposite of everything he had tried before. He pulled his chakra as far away from the seal as he could, and tried to draw out something, anything, from the depleted tenketsu under the seal. He felt a response, and his vision went dark. Place, not applicable. Time, not applicable. Why am I all wet? Blue eyes snapped open suddenly, quickly taking in their surroundings. The lighting in this place was depressingly low, but not so much that he couldn't see. He also noticed that the pool of water he was laying in was only a few centimeters deep. He stood up, intending to dry himself off, only to be surprised when every part of his body not currently immersed immediately lost all trace of moisture. What the shit? Is this even water? And where the hell am I? The massive hallway he was in seemed to be carved out of a single block of stone. The dim lighting seemed to simultaneously come from everywhere and nowhere. One end of the hall appeared to trail off into an endless void. The other ended abruptly in a gate, the bars of which were too far apart to stop any human. Well, that's not a good sign. What have I gotten myself into this time? Despite being intimidated by the thought of whatever the gate was meant to hold back, he didn't relish the idea of walking out into infinity, so he moved closer in hopes of finding out more. He found it, in the form of a giant claw trying to impale him as he approached. Gah! What the hell? He yelped as he stumbled backwards on his ass. His query was answered by the appearance of a massive nine-tailed fox thingy, if foxes had humanoid arms and opposable thumbs. Just the creature he'd been looking for, before finding himself here. Well, that answers some questions, he said, trying to control his fear with small talk and levity. You! The one who imprisons me! If not for these bars, I would consume you and have my freedom. Oh, thank the gods, you can talk! He exclaimed with a huge grin, getting back on his feet. Whatever the Bijou had been expecting in response, it certainly wasn't that. Naruto knew he would cherish that look of surprise for the rest of his life, however short that may be. Nobody seems to know anything about you, or if they do, they aren't telling me. I was worried you'd just be a big old ball of chakra and rage. Not quite, the Bijou replied, whatever vestigial sense of humor it possessed seeming to be awakened by Naruto's rambling. But for what purpose would my jailer wish to converse with me? I certainly have nothing to say to you. Naruto merely pouted at the continued hostility. Okay, let's get things straight. I'm not the one who put you inside me, and I certainly never had a say in it. And on that note, how are we separated? Where are we? You don't even know that much? Have your masters taught you nothing before you tried to draw on my power? Naruto scratched the back of his head, exasperated. I told you, nobody tells me shit. I had to trick people into confirming that you were inside me. Then I had to guess my way in here, wherever here is. The QB seemed almost impressed by that. How cunning of you! Very well then. Before continuing, it arched its back and stretched in a way that reminded Naruto of an oversized cat. All that you see around you is an abstract representation of the seal that binds us together. This is a pocket dimension to facilitate interaction. None of it truly exists in normal space-time, even our current forms are merely false constructs. Wherever you were when you made contact with me, you are still there, and no time will have passed when you awaken. Oh, okay. Naruto, for all his intelligence, did not have the education in theoretical physics he needed to truly understand the situation. No one did, that knowledge having been lost in the ancient wars that scorched the world. Still, he got the gist of it. This was all fake, and he was still sitting on his bed. I was kinda expecting that you'd just talk in my head or something, but this works too. Indeed, said the demon, just before its eyes narrowed in cold anger. But you still haven't told me what you want. Oh, right, he answered sheepishly. I, kinda need your help with Dash. Of course you do, the demon interrupted. That's all your kind ever want. Maybe if you'd let me finish, Naruto growled. I was hoping you'd help me free you. For the second time in their conversation, the bijou was caught off guard. Slowly, it lowered its face to get a better look at the surprising specimen of humanity who had sought it out. You have my attention. Well, it's too late to start paying attention now. I've already said everything. An awkward silence filled the air as Naruto cleaned out his right ear with his index finger. So how do we do that? The mighty beast gave a bark that could have been a laugh. It's a simple enough task. You need only unlock this gate, and I shall be free. Naruto's gaze was drawn to a slip of paper that seemed to be the only thing holding the gate shut, flimsy as it was. He merely scoffed at the suggestion. I meant without killing me, you dick! I'm not stupid. If it were that easy, the old man wouldn't have let my life be so miserable. Not if I could just quit and leave whenever I wanted to. Well, you should have been more specific. The Kyuubi chuckled, as if it hadn't just tried to talk a child into suicide. Still, I find myself curious. You have my boundless power within you, and you've just figured out how to tap it. Why are you so intent on giving it up? In my experience, humans often desire power above all else. Yeah, well, power is just a means to an end. If a type of power only gets in your way, it's less than useless. Naruto replied with a melancholy smile. Your power can't get me what I want. And what do you want? The demon asked, its curiosity roused. Same thing you do, freedom. Then we have an accord, child. The Kyuubi grinned, showing off its massive teeth in what Naruto assumed was supposed to be a friendly gesture. I am not capable of altering this prison from within, but I have enough familiarity with the celestial tongue to aid you in your own attempts. Wait, celestial tongue? How's learning a new language supposed to help me release you? It is said to be the language of the gods, with which they created the world we know. The written form of this language is what you would call Fuinjutsu, the sealing arts. The demon shrugged. The other version of the story is that it is man's own invention from before the fall, with which he sought to bend reality to his will. But such myths are from long before even my time. What is important is that you must learn it if you wish to set me free without harming yourself. Fuinjutsu was the basis of the Yondai Mezhuration, and it can subdue even bijou. Not a bad way to continue my education. Naruto gave an enthusiastic salute. Understood, Kyuubi-sensei. Call me Kurama. Naruto responded with a smile. I get the feeling this is the start of a beautiful friendship. Main Street, near the West Gate. 10 years after the Kyuubi's defeat, 637th year of the Sage. The past 3 years had been very productive for Naruto, having secretly become Konoha's foremost Fuinjutsu master. While he wouldn't exactly say that it was easy, all the facts suggested that it was inevitable. He had been taught by an entity that understood the art on a level beyond any human, inside of a realm where time didn't truly flow. The only fundamental limit to his rate of learning had been the same as when learning from Kage Bunshin. If his construct body experienced too much in one go, he'd face intense mental strain as a vast amount of information attempted to transfer, and much of it would be lost. That it had still taken 3 years to master Fuinjutsu to the required level, under those conditions, only emphasized how absurdly difficult their task was. But he was finally ready. Since his most important training could be done instantly, and in complete secrecy, his life had been reasonably uneventful and free of scrutiny. Too bad the Uchiha clan couldn't say the same. In the year 635, the heir and shining star of their clan had turned against them and butchered all but his own brother. The official story was simply that he had snapped and gone on a killing spree without explanation. Once again, Naruto was convinced that the official story was bullshit. The Uchiha were a clan of hundreds, comprising the majority of the police force and a significant fraction of the village's total ninja forces. That they would all be within the walls of their compound at the same time by chance, without a single exception, was difficult to believe. That all of them could be slain without anyone outside their walls becoming aware of the commotion, even the roving Anbu patrols, seemed just as unlikely. It reeked of a setup. Someone had arranged for all of them to be off duty and at home at the same time, and then moved and rescheduled patrols to make sure that no one would stumble upon the massacre until it was done. Naruto couldn't think of any possibilities other than state-sponsored genocide, with Itachi either being framed or doing it on orders from above. Given that he hadn't protested his innocence to anyone in the 2 years since, and his brother Sasuke hadn't met with an unfortunate accident, Naruto could only assume the latter was true and that Itachi had negotiated his brother's survival. Kurama had expressed great satisfaction upon hearing of the demise of so many Uchiha. That conversation had led to Naruto learning that the demon had been forced to attack Konoha against its will. While the greatest of the Bijuu had no love for humanity, Kurama had only ever attacked humans without provocation on 2 occasions, both of which were the result of Sharingan compulsion. While Naruto wasn't the sort to accept its word at face value, there seemed to be enough evidence to support the claim. The history books already described Uchiha Madara commanding the Kyuubi in battle against the Shodai Hokage, Senju Hashirama, and Konoha's leaders must have been pretty confident that the Uchiha had been up to no good again if they sanctioned the death of the entire clan. This only renewed Naruto's resolve to free Kurama. Not only was the demon as much a victim as anyone, and Naruto didn't condone slavery, but Naruto himself had no desire to be a tool for a government that would wipe out children and non-combatant Uchiha along with the guilty. A secret that everyone knows isn't much of a secret, so there was no way in hell that the Uchiha leadership would have told all of their clan members about any nefarious plots that were afoot. They had died only because Konoha wanted to avoid a scandal. Now that Naruto could finally unlock the seal, he had positioned himself near the village wall in preparation for releasing the Kyuubi. He'd already drawn the necessary seals on his torso, and a simple activation charge of chakra would finish the job. His location near the most well-traveled gate was no coincidence. It wasn't enough for his goals that he simply free Kurama. Other people needed to know about it before Naruto would ever be allowed to go his merry way. He intended to have plenty of witnesses to the end of his Jinchuriki career. Kurama had been a good sport about the idea, having agreed to hop over the wall and leave without a fight. There was an element of pragmatism to that decision, as Konoha had already demonstrated the ability to seal a bijou if given a chance. Kurama was even willing to go out of its way to avoid killing anyone, in order to keep Naruto from getting into too much trouble. Not that the boy thought he could do this without some sort of ensuing shitstorm, but he was confident he could ride out that storm so long as nobody died. Making his way over to a rooftop corner overlooking the street, Naruto decided that it was time to begin his retirement speech. "Hey, assholes!" he shouted over the din of the crowd. Sure enough, the mood of the crowd shifted, conversation died down, and a whole lot of people were now glaring up at him. Just as planned. 10 years ago, the Yondaime needed my help to stop the Kyuubi. For 10 years, I've been keeping it locked away from the rest of the world. Glares gave way to shock, worry, and nervous muttering. If anyone hadn't been paying attention before, they were now. But despite the importance of what I do, this job sucks. Long hours, no pay or benefits, and everyone treats me like shit. He charged up chakra into his right hand, and lifted his shirt to expose his torso and seals with his left hand. Tensions in the crowd increased. The ninja among them looked like they were about to jump him. Time to wrap it up. "I quit!" he yelled, and brought his right hand to the seal. All hell broke loose. Potent red chakra flowed rapidly from the seal, coalescing in the middle of the street. Its power could be felt throughout the village, even by the least chakra-sensitive of the villagers. Civilians were panicking and running for their lives every which way, with some forcing their way out of the village past bewildered gate guards. Many were frozen in terror, while some of the braver ninja threw weapons and fired elemental jutsu at the building mass of chakra. It was pure chaos. The demon rebuilt itself in stages. At first, it was nothing more than a giant, transparent outline which towered over most of the nearby buildings. The attacks that were being flung at it simply passed through and sailed into the sky. Deep within the outline, a core of raw power formed and began spreading inexorably outward. Only when it contacted the outline did the whole construct begin to solidify. Detailed features of the bijou began to form, and the attacks directed at it finally managed to hit something, only to have absolutely no effect. 15 seconds after Naruto triggered the release, the Kyuubi was fully restored. This seemed to cause a spontaneous lull in the battle, as the assorted ninja tried to figure out what to do about their seemingly invincible foe, and the demon simply gazed across the landscape. Then it drew in a massive breath, and everyone except Naruto braced themselves for some kind of attack. It came as a surprise to the people of Konoha when the bijou spoke to them. "See you later, shitlords!" It laughed, before it bounded over the village wall and took off running at a speed no human could hope to match. Thanks to the tall forests surrounding Konoha, it was out of sight within seconds. Naruto merely smiled. "I feel like I've been a bad influence on him, her, it, whatever. That is my eternal legacy, a bijou with a foul mouth. He savored the looks of shock on the rabble in the street, before he suddenly began feeling dizzy. Whoa, that still took a lot out of me. I need to go home and take a nap. With that thought, he began carefully making his way back to his apartment, the panicking citizens of Konoha failing to notice him now that they had much bigger things to worry about. Naruto's apartment. 1 hour later. Uzumaki Naruto. Herg? Came the sleepy boy's eloquent reply. He opened his eyes and was met with the sight of a man in traditional Anbu operative garb, standing by the foot of his bed. The Hokage has ordered an emergency council meeting to discuss recent events. You have been summoned to testify before them. His no-nonsense tone implied that refusal was not an option. Naruto glanced over to his alarm clock, sitting on his nightstand. Just over an hour since I got back. Not as much sleep as I'd have liked, but more than I expected to get. Maybe with all the confusion, they assumed I was dead. He sat up, hanging his feet over the side of the bed, and began slipping his sandals on. He was still wearing the rest of his clothes, having been too tired to go through the trouble of getting into his pajamas. Once he was done, he started walking in the direction of his bathroom. Now, Uzumaki! The irritated Anbu said. Naruto directed a mild glare towards him. Hey man, I gotta pee. So unless you want me to whip my dick out in front of the council and piss on their shoes. He trailed off. Fine. Just make it quick, said the ninja, as Naruto closed the bathroom door to take care of business. He would later come to regret taking his eyes off the boy, as that bathroom trip proved to be a vital part of Naruto's escape plan, in the event that things turned against him. Streets of Konoha. 2 minutes later. Evidently, the Anbu sent to bring him to the Hokage's tower wasn't just there to make sure he didn't skip out on the meeting. The man was also Naruto's bodyguard. However bad the glares and whispers had been before, it had nothing on the anger they showed him now. Naruto was certain that some brave soul, or perhaps an entire lynch mob, would have attacked him in the middle of the street if not for the intimidating escort walking beside him. Apparently, no longer being a Jinchuriki wasn't enough to reverse public opinion after he had scared the metaphorical crap out of everyone in the village. Some people were just so difficult to please. One man wasn't content to keep his anger bottled up. You rotten little shit! He yelled, waving his fist at Naruto. The Hokage should have killed you years ago. Most of the other people nearby made noises of agreement. On the inside, Naruto couldn't help but be somewhat amused, even as he was angered by the words. Bijou can't die, morons. They're a force of nature. If I'd been killed after the sealing, you still would have had to deal with Kurama's reappearance eventually. Outwardly, he was much less polite. Hey, fuck you, buddy! He shouted back. You all hated me when I kept a demon locked away, then you hate me more when I stop. You hypocritical idiots! The crowd only got more hostile after Naruto antagonized them, and his Anbu escort was getting nervous. Uzumaki, I think it's time we speed this trip up, he said before placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder and using Shunshin to convey them safely to the foot of the tower. Hokage's tower, meeting chamber. 1.5 hours later. Naruto was bored. Bored. He had been told to wait outside the meeting room until called for, but the council apparently wasn't in that much of a rush to see him. The flurry of aides rushing in and out implied that they were more interested in running damage control than in questioning him about the details. The next time the doors opened, the Anbu who came out told him that the council would finally see him now. With a spring in his step, Naruto walked into the meeting room and sat himself down at the massive circular table like he owned the place. The more easygoing among the clan heads already seated at the table seemed amused at his manners, though most showed disdain. The Hokage, decked out in his robes and smoking his pipe, addressed him first. Given recent events, I assume you know the truth about what happened to the Kyuubi 10 years ago? Pretty much, yeah. Not telling me about it was pretty mean, you know, Naruto replied. The old Hokage sighed. And how is it that you found out? This got an amused smirk from the boy. Are you serious? A secret that everyone knows isn't much of a secret. It was never going to stay buried for long. Some of the other people at the table looked sheepish, as if the idea that Naruto could figure things out on his own hadn't occurred to them. Others seemed to be sending smug looks at their peers, as if to say, I told you so. For the first time since Naruto had arrived, one of the council members spoke up. The Hyuga leader, judging by the weird eyes. And why, pray tell, did you feel the need to release the Kyuubi inside our very village? A better question would be why not? Naruto asked, with a small smirk adorning his face. Most people didn't seem to like that I was keeping the big bad demon locked up, so I figured I should stop doing that for a change, see if that made things better. How? Asked a one-eyed, crippled old man that Naruto didn't recognize as Shimura Danzo. Breaking the seal is supposed to be fatal. How did you survive? Naruto shrugged. I had help, he explained. Sarutobi face-palmed in exasperation. You made a deal with the Kyuubi? You shouldn't have trusted such a creature. I didn't, not fully, Naruto replied, locking his hands behind his head. But you'd be surprised how friendly demons can be when you offer them everything they want. It was certainly nicer than most humans I've met. Nevertheless, you had a duty to the village, the cripple interrupted. Jinchuriki are vital to maintaining the balance of power between villages. You were chosen to contain the Bijou and wield its power for Konoha. And there it is, thought Naruto. Now we get to the heart of the matter. That's strange, he responded out loud. Nobody informed me about any duty. I certainly never signed up for any duty. He punctuated his words with a glare towards the cripple. And frankly, that duty sucks no end of cock. Nevertheless, that duty is vital to Konoha, Sarutobi replied, looking much frostier than Naruto had ever seen him before. Given that you can apparently break the seal at will, it would be foolish to force you to take the Kyuubi into yourself again. But I must insist that you tell me where it has gone, so we can reclaim it. So you can enslave an intelligent being and force another kid to go through my life? What if I don't want to? He tested. Naruto wasn't entirely comfortable locking glares with one of the few people to have ever shown him kindness. But the Uchiha massacre, and his own situation, had long since shattered his belief in the old man's innate goodness. This was a lord of ninja, and he was capable of terrible deeds. Speaking of which, if you will not give up the information voluntarily, then I will be forced to subject you to interrogation. Everyone in the room was paying rapt attention, curious as to whether it would come to that. Naruto snorted in derision. Congratulations, you just burned your last bridge with me, for nothing. He folded his arms before continuing. You should understand by now that I'm not a moron. The Kyuubi and I both agreed that it would be better if I didn't know where it went. I have no answers to give you. The Kyuubi, knowing that the one who controlled it was probably still alive, had decided to shrink its form and go into hiding for a century or two. And considering the chakra beast didn't require such trivialities as food or air, it could take advantage of some truly impressive hiding places. It had no intention of being captured or used ever again. The old cripple slammed his fist into the table. Konoha's greatest weapon is now frolicking in the wilderness, and we don't have any idea where it could be. This is a disaster. I don't see how this is my problem, Naruto replied cheekily. He began tilting his chair back to amuse himself. Especially considering I'll be leaving soon. People here still don't like me, last I checked. Go figure. I'm afraid I can't allow that, Sarutobi cut in. Naruto was disappointed, to say the least, in the direction the old man seemed to be taking the conversation. And why not? I'm not a ninja. I'm not a Jinchuriki. I know I'm still a minor, but that's hardly a good reason when I already live alone. Sarutobi couldn't help but massage his temples to relieve the stress. I'm afraid your legacy is such that you are still important to Konoha, even without the Kyuubi. Suffice to say, Naruto didn't like where this was going. Oh no, 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 he exclaimed as he waved his arms around. I spent years working my ass off to claw my way out from the Kyuubi's shadow, and now you want to put me under his? You screwed me over by not telling anyone before, and then you'll screw me over by releasing that information now? Most of the clan heads were visibly confused by this. One rather large man, an Akimichi if Naruto wasn't mistaken, gave voice to these thoughts. What is he talking about, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi decided to reveal Naruto's other big secret, despite the boy trying to mentally will him to shut up. The Yondaime Hokage didn't pick a child at random. He sealed the Kyuubi into his own newborn son. Not to mention that he truly is the last known living Uzumaki. The name wasn't picked at random. He paused for a few seconds to organize his thoughts. And given that he seems to have discovered all of these facts despite my attempts at hiding them, and successfully unsealed the bijou, I imagine he is already a useful prodigy in his own right. The council room became deathly quiet for a few seconds before it was broken by Jonin Commander Nara Shikaka saying, "Called it." His friend and peer, Yamanaka Inoichi, groaned at the outburst. Naruto was displeased. So that's it then? I just can't be allowed to have any freedom? Sarutobi nodded sadly. He understood that this meeting was probably the end of any remotely friendly relationship he might have had with the boy. And if I try to leave anyway? Then you will be placed under house arrest until such time as you prove more agreeable. Naruto seemed to ponder that for a few moments, before unexpectedly bursting out into laughter. Some of those present were convinced that he had finally snapped from the pressures of a hard life, but as he slowly calmed down and caught his breath, he decided to answer their unspoken questions. Well then, it's a good thing I already left, isn't it? he said, grinning widely. The Kage Bunshin dispersed in a puff of smoke, and the meeting room erupted into chaos. Merchant caravan, east of Konoha. Same time. In the back of one of the wagons of a routine merchant caravan, carefully hidden among the various odds and ends, Uzumaki Naruto was snoozing peacefully. He had managed to successfully stow away among the travelers and slip out of the village's east gate without being detected. Rather than ditch the caravan as soon as he was out, he had decided to catch up on his nap that had been so rudely interrupted by his unwelcome Anbu visitor. However, the information transfer from his Kage Bunshin put an end to that plan. As his eyes fluttered open, Naruto considered everything that he had learned. The villagers still hate me, and the old man wants to keep me prisoner in that environment. Guess this means I won't be going back anytime soon. Had the people of Konoha started to ease up in their anger, and the Hokage not tried to hold him against his will, Naruto would have been content to return to Konoha as soon as he woke up. Unfortunately, his escape plan had proven necessary after all. He wasn't too worried about making his own way in the world, however. Fuinjutsu had a wide range of useful applications and not very many practitioners, so he didn't expect any trouble supporting himself with his skills. The only real concern was pursuit, since the Hokage had revealed everything to the council in order to justify keeping a firm grip on him. I bet those assholes are kicking themselves for making me wait an hour and a half, he thought, pleased that he had such a solid head start. Even so, it's time I left the road and started moving faster. He had no intention of getting picked up by a tracker team after having come so far. With renewed determination, he stood up and leaped from the wagon, getting the attention of some of the caravan drivers. Sorry about hitching a ride without asking, but if it makes you feel any better, you just helped me escape from an abusive home, he said with an exaggerated bow. Also, I swear I didn't break or steal anything. An awkward silence followed as the two parties stared at each other. So, bye. He waved as he darted into the tree line, eager to begin his new life. Mount Myaboku. Same time. Questioned a massive, ancient toad resting near a pond. This got the attention of a much smaller, but only slightly less ancient, toad who was nearby. What is it, honorable sage? The great toad sage looked puzzled for a moment, before he replied. The future. I can no longer see it. His smaller companion, Fukasaku, boggled at the thought. What does that mean? The sage sighed, not sure what to make of the situation. The child of prophecy has escaped the path he was forced onto at birth. Destiny itself lies shattered. He brought a finger to his mouth. It is quite fascinating. The future is in flux, and will be for some time. I have no idea what will happen now. Nobody does. He chuckled. That Naruto boy is really something. Naruto has freed the Kyuubi from its shackles, and freed himself in the process. But humanity still hurtles towards destruction, and he finds himself lured back into the fray. It's not his destiny to save the world, it's his choice. Chapter 1. Inconvenient Truths. Near the western coast of Wave Country. 640th year of the Sage, 13 years after the Kyuubi's attack. Hatake Kakashi wasn't sure what had possessed him to continue on this fool's errand. Sure, his male student had been all too eager to test himself against skilled opponents, and his female student had been taken in by their deceitful client's sob story. And to be fair, they had both been at the top of their respective genders in the academy. But the military wasn't a democracy, and he should have put his foot down and taken his squad back to Konoha. Instead, he was now facing one of the 7 goddamn swordsmen of Kiri, with nothing more than an undermanned genin team at his back. Sasuke, Sakura, guard Tazuna, he ordered, and his team moved to obey. Frankly, his genin wouldn't be much more effective against Momochi Zabuza than the old bridge builder himself would be, but he was hoping that keeping all of his charges in one place would make it easier to defend them. Not for the first time, he wondered why he had decided to take on a genin team in the first place. Their teamwork was only good if one didn't look too deep, since Sakura was only too happy to follow Sasuke's lead. There was no real camaraderie. Copying Kakashi, being saddled with a pair of brats fresh off the teat. The swordsman chuckled from his position on his sword, embedded in the side of a tree. My, how the mighty have fallen! Kakashi's only response was to raise the headband covering his left eye, revealing the reason he had earned that nickname. Against an enemy such as this, he knew he'd have to go all out to win. Bringing out the Sharingan so soon? I suppose I should be flattered. Zabuza taunted, ignoring the surprised expression on one of the genin. But that fancy I can't copy what it can't see, now can it? He punctuated that statement with a sudden hop onto the surface of a nearby pool of water, all the better to fuel his elemental techniques. Just as Kakashi had feared, his first move was Kiri's signature technique, the Kirigakure no Jutsu. The already thick mist became unnaturally so, to the point where Kakashi couldn't see more than 2 meters in any direction. "He'll come after me first," Kakashi reassured his team. When Zabuza still served Kiri, he was renowned as an expert in silent killing. "Be careful." Sakura gulped, fearing that she was in way over her head. Sasuke still looked determined, but even the normally confident boy seemed like he preferred to be elsewhere. 8 points: liver, lungs, spine, subclavian, jugal dash. A massive gust of wind suddenly tore through the clearing, interrupting the monologue and rapidly clearing away the chakra-laden mist. It was strong enough that the genin and Tazuna almost felt like they would be blown away, though the older ninja were able to anchor themselves with chakra. Kakashi and Zabuza, both having been surprised by what could only have been a jutsu, looked towards the source of the wind. Approximately 20 meters to the side, on the edge of the clearing, stood a boy of roughly 13 years. His blonde hair, expressive blue eyes, and cheerful smile served to make him appear open and friendly. On the other hand, the black cargo pants, burnt orange t-shirt, weapon pouches, and obvious musculature gave both of the experienced jonin the impression of a tiger on the prowl. Naruto, Kakashi recognized. The resemblance to his dead sensei was unnerving, as was the memory of what the boy had accomplished during his final day in Konoha. "What is he doing here?" "Sorry if I'm interrupting your dick-waving contest," the newcomer said, obviously not feeling the least bit sorry. "But I was looking for someone, and that mist was getting really annoying." Zabuza, for his part, made a completely reasonable assumption given the information at hand. He knew that Kakashi must have been anticipating a battle with more Kiri defectors, after fighting the Demon Brothers. He also knew that genin teams normally had 3 members. So if Kakashi had a genin who possessed a strong wind affinity, it would have made perfect tactical sense to order that genin to trail slightly behind the main group in order to clear away any mist. Since Zabuza knew he would be at a disadvantage against the Sharingan without the mist, he immediately charged to kill the lone genin first. Naruto was not one of Kakashi's genin. Zabuza's first slash seemed to confirm his assumptions by hitting home, and Kakashi was on the verge of a panic attack until the critically wounded Naruto dispersed in a puff of smoke. Then a second Naruto dashed from the nearby trees and promptly cut through Zabuza's spine with an invisible blade of wind. But Zabuza hadn't survived a fight with the Mizukage by being stupid, and he was a big fan of the decoy clone strategy as well. The cut on his back bled only water before the Mizu Bunshin collapsed into a puddle, and Naruto once again found himself the target of a charging swordsman. Kakashi was torn between staying to defend his team, or rushing to aid his sensei's unacknowledged offspring, and his indecision chose the former. Zabuza had anticipated many possibilities from this surprisingly talented genin when he made his next attack, anything from dodging, using another wind jutsu to try and blow him away, or preferably dying in agony. It came as another surprise, then, when the boy merely raised his left hand to intercept the massive blade. He had just enough time to notice a glowing seal inscribed on the blonde's palm, before his sword made contact with a floating shield of transparent blue chakra, roughly 30 centimeters in diameter, that stopped his momentum cold. A barrier. Impossible, Zabuza thought. How could a lone genin erect such a powerful barrier so quickly? Unbeknownst to him, Kakashi's mind was in similar turmoil. Naruto, unaware or uncaring of his opponent's shock, raised his right hand towards Zabuza and caused an identical seal to glow. His face, which had previously been stoic during the battle, now bore a victorious smirk. "Bad boy. Time out 5 minutes." Zabuza didn't have time to respond to the odd statement before chakra flowed from Naruto's right palm. This time, rather than forming a small shield, it formed a tiny dome prison with the swordsman trapped firmly inside. It also cleaved off a huge chunk of his outstretched sword in the process, a chunk which was now supported only by Naruto's left hand. "Oh shit," Naruto grimaced, looking genuinely surprised. "I seriously didn't mean to do that. Sorry about your sword. Hope you can get it repaired." He dropped the sword fragment and lowered his hands. Zabuza was disappointed to discover that the barrier didn't require constant contact. "Don't worry about it, kid," he growled, giving Naruto his finest death glare. "I know just how to fix it." One of Naruto's eyebrows rose in response to Zabuza's bloodthirsty gaze. "So why are you looking at me like that? I don't know how to reforge a sword." Their pleasant chat was interrupted when Kakashi arrived on the scene, keeping a close eye on Zabuza. For the first time, Naruto got a good look at the man's headband. Wonderful. Konoha ninja, he sighed. And the day was going so well. "I don't suppose there's any way to kill him from the outside, is there?" Kakashi questioned, earning himself the next round of Zabuza's glaring. "Well, I could just strengthen the barrier until it stops air transfer, then wait until he suffocates," Naruto replied in a lecturing tone. "But I was actually considering letting him go." "What?" Kakashi almost yelled, his head turning so fast that Naruto was surprised he didn't hurt himself. How do I put it? Naruto mumbled, bringing a finger to his lips in thought. This whole battle is pointless. Observe. The two Jonin paid close attention as Naruto started digging around in one of his pockets, before he pulled out a storage scroll. After unraveling it, a small dose of chakra caused it to disgorge its contents. Ta-da! He grinned, seeming very pleased with himself as he held up a severed head for the older men to peruse. In the distance, Tazuna collapsed on his ass and gaped in surprise, while the genin were left wondering what all the fuss was about. Zabuza pursed his lips behind the bandages covering them, and let out a breath. Gato. So my client is already dead? Yep, Naruto nodded. I normally try to stay out of local politics, but I was in the area after my trip to Water Country, and this asshole really had it coming. Call it an act of charity. Everyone started celebrating as soon as I showed off his corpse. He took a moment to reseal the head before he continued. I killed off his top lieutenants too, but I figured I should stick around a bit to make sure his thugs didn't try anything. Then I was approached by someone who told me her dad might still be in danger from assassins that Gato hired before his untimely demise. He took a moment to look over towards Tazuna, and waved. The genin and old man, being too far away to overhear much of the conversation, simply looked confused by the gesture. So the lady I was talking to begged me to find Daddy Bridge Builder and make sure he gets back home. And when a cute MILF asks me for a favor, I have a hard time saying no. He blushed slightly and refused to meet the eyes of the older men. Call it another act of charity. Well, this has been a complete waste of time. Zabuza griped, sheathing the remnant of his sword on his back. How am I supposed to get a decent paycheck now? You're Momochi Zabuza, right? Naruto queried. I think I heard this other guy say that name, and you're obviously a rogue swordsman. Upon hearing Zabuza's grunt of affirmation, he continued. Have you considered going back to Kiri? I hear they have a new Mizukage, and she's remarkably sane. No bloodline purges, murdering political rivals, or anything. While Zabuza seemed cautiously optimistic at the news, Kakashi turned his gaze on Naruto and narrowed his eyes. That reminds me, he began, drawing their attention back towards him. Konoha recently got hold of a copy of Kirigakure's latest bingo book edition. You feature quite prominently, something about defeating the Yondaime Mizukage. Zabuza's eyes nearly popped out of his head, such was his surprise, though his ego was somewhat soothed by the knowledge that the boy who trounced him had previously done the same to the Mizukage. Naruto had a different reaction. That bitch! He shouted in outrage, shaking a fist in the air. She acted all sweet when I took him down, but now she puts me on her village's hit list. I'll shove my foot up her ass if I see her again. Actually, Kakashi interrupted. Your entry in the book describes you as a national hero and instructs all of their ninja to avoid combat with you, unless you directly threaten Kiri's safety. A bingo book wasn't just for telling ninja who to kill, after all. It was an identification guide, so anytime a village thought its ninja needed to be able to identify a foreign combatant on sight, that person got an entry in their book. Naruto, never having been a registered ninja, hadn't known that detail. Oh, he visibly deflated. Well, alright then. Kinda surprised they got the word out so soon. Let me guess, Zabuza said in a mocking tone. Another act of charity? What can I say? I'm a really nice guy. Naruto seemed almost embarrassed by the admission. So are we friends now, or are you going to go into a murder frenzy and make me have to kill you? Zabuza pretended to ponder the question for a moment, though the choice was obvious. I think I'll let you off the hook, just this once. As the words left his mouth, Naruto let the barrier collapse. Zabuza ran off without wasting any more words, while Kakashi kept a close eye on his retreating form. Hey! Naruto shouted, as the swordsman disappeared into the trees. You forgot half of your sword! With no reply to be heard, he shrugged, picked up the chunk of metal, and called out to the genin team. Anyone want a souvenir? Wilderness Trail. 5 minutes later. Seeing as everyone remaining in the clearing had the same goal, they ended up walking towards Tazuna's home together. Even so, a blind man could have seen the tensions in the group. The genin remained wary of the strange boy after his display of skill, and Naruto himself was bothered by Kakashi's speculative glances, whenever the older ninja could tear his eyes away from his pornography. Oddly enough, Tazuna himself was the member of the group who was most at ease. With Gato dead, and his hired ninja convinced to abandon the job as a result, the bridge builder was rightfully convinced that his problems had been resolved. Naruto was a take-charge kind of guy, though, so he decided to attack the rising tension just as he had attacked every other problem in his life. So, he began clapping his hands together. I think some introductions are in order. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, seal designer and merchant. And part-time hero, I take it? Tazuna jumped in, his pleasant mood rendering the old drunkard more polite than usual. Anyway, I'm Tazuna, building designer and foreman. Ah, a kindred spirit. Naruto smiled back at him and shook his hand. And something of a hero yourself, given what you've been up to recently. Tazuna was appropriately flattered by the praise. Kakashi snapped his book closed and put it away before joining the conversation. Hatake Kakashi, Jonin of Konohagakure, and commander of Genin Team 7. So, I don't mean to be rude, Naruto interrupted, glancing at the rest of the team. But did someone die on the way here? You're one short. Kakashi shook his head slightly. Their graduating class wasn't evenly divisible. Normally an older genin would be slotted in, but the admin people seemed to be running a little slow. Naruto then turned expectantly towards the two genin, waiting for them to introduce themselves. Finally, one of them took the bait. Uchiha Sasuke, genin. Well, he's a wordy bastard, isn't he? Naruto thought, waiting a few more seconds before facing the final member of their entourage. I'm Haruno Sakura. The sole female chimed in. Also a genin. She bowed politely, before a hesitant look crossed her face. Would you happen to be the same Naruto who released the Kyuubi inside Konoha a few years back? Yeah, that was me, he exclaimed nostalgically, the demon having become something resembling a friend during their time together. I was also in your academy class for a while, but you might not remember since I kept to myself. So how much have you heard about that Kyuubi business? My parents said that you were supposed to keep it under control, but you nearly killed us all by releasing it, she answered nervously, no longer comfortable looking directly at him after her admission. Well, isn't that special? Naruto pouted, shoving his hands in his pockets. That kind of bullshit is why I left in the first place. Everything is Naruto's fault. Let's hate him for holding the Kyuubi, then let's hate him for not holding the Kyuubi. Never mind that no one died, clearly Naruto is the root of all evil. He paused, before glancing at the Jonin. Do you agree with that assessment, Kakashi? Kakashi rolled his visible eye, not liking where the conversation was going. Not really. Konoha hasn't exactly treated you fairly. He turned his head so that he could look Naruto in the eyes, ignoring the boy's snort at his understatement. Even so, standing orders are to capture you on sight. Everyone else, Tazuna included, tensed in preparation for a fight. Naruto narrowed his eyes and commenced a staring match with the Jonin. You have a genin team and are escorting a civilian, Naruto growled, his voice warning against any hostile moves. Do you really want to start that shit now? No, I don't, Kakashi replied. But I'd appreciate it if you didn't threaten my charges. Naruto returned his eyes to the trail. I'm not threatening anyone. But battles are chaotic, and people can make mistakes. If you start a fight while they're standing right next to us, they'll get involved. Doesn't matter what we want. Kakashi nodded. Does your team know? Naruto asked, looking at the two genin. The lack of comprehension in their expressions was enough of an answer for him. I'll take that as a negative. Good. At least the old man didn't blab to everyone. I don't need that kind of attention. Hokage-sama was concerned that your safety would be jeopardized if the world learned about it, so only Jonin have been briefed. Kakashi explained, before pausing to collect his thoughts. He still cares, you know. I stopped giving a damn about his feelings the moment he threatened to have me tortured. Naruto grumbled, eliciting gasps from the three other listeners. He acts like a kind grandfather, but he still does some pretty nasty stuff. His sad gaze towards Sasuke managed to confuse everyone else, but he didn't offer any elaboration, and nobody was willing to ask. We're coming up on the village soon. Let's wrap this job up. Tazuna's home. 1 hour later. Tazuna's family had been thrilled to see him arrive safe and sound, and his daughter Tsunami had insisted that everyone share a late lunch, ignorant of the potential for conflict between Naruto and the Konoha team. It didn't escape Sasuke's notice that Naruto and Kakashi had seated themselves opposite each other, and both were eating light in anticipation of getting a good workout. The Uchiha idly considered asking if they would allow him to observe, then quashed the impulse. He didn't want to seem like a starstruck child, even if he was certain it would be amazing. Once everyone had satisfied themselves, Kakashi decided it was time to begin the festivities. Well, Naruto, since you were kind enough to clear out any likely danger to my client, I think I can afford to spend some time working on my secondary mission. He rounded off his statement with a cheery eye smile that made Naruto want to punch him. Tazuna, who had been hoping they'd put that subject behind them, started looking nervously back and forth between the two. Tsunami and Inari had no idea what the Jonin was talking about, but Sakura twitched in her seat, apparently thinking they would just leap onto the table and start hitting each other. Naruto settled on a feral grin and slowly got out of his chair. Let's take this outside. No sense breaking our host's stuff. He calmly walked out the front door, and Kakashi followed, leaving his genin with orders to defend the house in their absence. Nearby forest clearing. 3 minutes later. After a short but pleasant stroll through the woods, Naruto and Kakashi were satisfied that they had found an acceptably secluded place for the upcoming hostilities. Even so, Kakashi decided to give the diplomatic approach one more try, if only for his own peace of mind. It helped that this was the first chance they had to speak in private. You know, Hokage-sama would be happy to prove your lineage to the world once you're safely behind Konoha's walls. He opened, altering his body language to appear non-threatening. He seemed pretty certain that a decent PR campaign would be enough to change public opinion in the village, once the announcement was made. Yeah, well, I'm not willing to sacrifice my freedom just to see if he's right, Naruto countered, taking the opportunity to do some stretches. Besides, I've never wanted to be trapped in that man's shadow. Having had a well-known father himself, Kakashi could sympathize with that. But he still had a job to do. Your father would have wanted you to be a Konoha shinobi, Naruto. With your potential, you could be even greater than he was. Naruto scoffed, not at all impressed by the sentiment. If he wanted me to care about his opinions, he should have lived long enough to express them in person. I'm not going to be ruled by a man who died the day I was born. I've rejected worthier masters. Do you hate him that much? Kakashi asked, sounding very much like his puppy had just died. Hate? Naruto responded, genuinely surprised by the question. I never said I hated him. If anything, I pity him. He found himself in a bad position, where his loyalties conflicted with each other. Seeing that Kakashi didn't grasp his meaning, he paused his stretching to explain. His duty as a father was to protect me, and that meant getting me out of danger and sticking around to raise me. But his duty as a Hokage meant he had to sacrifice himself, use me as a Jinchuriki, and leave me to the mercies of a hostile village. He had to choose between those duties, and he decided to be a Hokage instead of a father. He spent a few seconds organizing his thoughts, not always being entirely sure of his own feelings when it came to the Yondaime. I don't hate him, and I respect his skills as a ninja, but I can't love him. Seeing that his opponent seemed upset by his words, Naruto decided to get to the bottom of it. Why are you taking this so personally anyway? Kakashi sighed, losing himself in memories of happier days. Your father was my Jonin sensei, and since my own father died when I was young, I looked up to him as a surrogate. Is that so? Naruto asked, taking a moment to scratch an itch on his back. Funny. I'm pretty certain we've never met before today. Kakashi wasn't sure if Naruto had intended to wound him with that statement, but it cut deep all the same. Just another person who should have been there for him, but wasn't. That's all I am to him. That's all I'll ever be. Naruto, not being the sort to kick a man when he was down, not emotionally, anyway, unless he really had it coming, saw the faint signs of distress in Kakashi and decided to shift the conversation back to safer territory. And maybe win their battle before it even started, if Kakashi fell for his next trick. You know, I wasn't kidding about respecting the Yondaime. You could even say he helped inspire me. He slowly pulled out a seemingly ordinary kunai from one of his pouches, and began lazily twirling it around by the ring. Even if the seal he put on me was a pain in the ass to get rid of, Fuinjutsu is truly an amazing art. Here, have a look. Naruto made a slow, underhanded toss towards Kakashi, careful not to trigger any well-honed instincts the experienced ninja would possess. Even so, the Jonin knew something was wrong with the kunai the moment he caught it and got a closer look at it. There's a seal engraved in the handle, similar to a design I've seen before. But it can't be. He looked up in shock, only to see Naruto disappear from his previous position and reappear right in front of him in the same instant. Hiraishin! Kakashi leaped backwards, too slowly to escape, but was surprised when Naruto squandered the advantage by performing a gentle palm thrust against his chest, which only seemed to cause a temporary itching sensation. He immediately tossed the rigged kunai far to the side and raised his headband to reveal the Sharingan, expecting that he would need the advantage in reflex time to cope with Naruto's superior speed. Naruto failed to meet his expectations, instead choosing to stand still and smirk at him. Why did you waste that attack? Kakashi asked, bracing himself in anticipation. You had me. You could have ended the fight then and there. Naruto's smirk transformed into a grin. I did end the fight. If you disagree, come and get me. Kakashi knew there had to be some trick, but Naruto was the defender in this battle and under no obligation to make the first move. Since Naruto didn't have any Hiraishin kunai in his hands, Kakashi decided to risk triggering the trap. He charged forward at his best speed, mindful not to let the boy get a lock on him with those barrier seals which had defeated Zabuza. When he was halfway to his opponent, the blonde emitted a pulse of chakra. Kakashi's muscles went slack, and he collapsed bonelessly onto the soft ground. Naruto chuckled at the sight, and began casually strolling up to his fallen adversary. That little love tap back there was me inscribing a seal onto your chest with my chakra. Neat trick that. Only the best Fuinjutsu users can do it, and only if they know a seal intimately. As he reached Kakashi, he knelt down and carefully rolled the man on his back to make sure he could still breathe. This particular design is actually one of my more recent creations, though I've used variants before. The new Mizukage commissioned it for dealing with an especially volatile prisoner. He pulled out another kunai and held it gently to Kakashi's throat. I win. Admit your defeat, and I'll let you up. Herg. Close enough. A second pulse of chakra signaled the end of the seal's effects, and Kakashi was allowed to pick himself off the ground. Naruto dropped the kunai at his feet, disappeared, then reappeared a second later with the kunai his opponent had thrown into the woods, before putting them both away. So where was I? Naruto continued, enjoying the opportunity to chat about his favorite non-ramen subject. That particular seal links a user with a target, and allows the user to disrupt the chakra network and voluntary muscle control of said target. So I noticed. Kakashi grumbled, not particularly happy to have experienced such helplessness firsthand. Any chance you could take this seal off of me? He asked, as he covered his Sharingan. They began walking sedately back to Tazuna's house. I could, but I won't, Naruto answered. Upon seeing Kakashi's pout, he elaborated. Konoha wants me captured, and I don't want to be captured. Since you're one of Konoha's top mobile assets, it would be stupid to let you keep trying. You might actually win someday. He breathed deeply, clearly basking in his victory. You're just going to have to live with being my bitch for the foreseeable future. Guess this means I need to pay a visit to Jiraiya-sama next time he's in town. Kakashi mumbled, though Naruto was able to hear him. Go ahead. It'll be interesting to see if Konoha's best seal master can break the protections on that design. Naruto replied with a smile. In the meantime, don't worry. Only I can activate it, since I'm the one who applied it. At least this way, I don't have to hurt you. As far as crushing defeats go, this was certainly the gentlest I've had, Kakashi admitted. Tazuna's house. 3 minutes later. When they opened the door to Tazuna's home, either of them were surprised to see that the inhabitants hadn't moved much, with the exception of Tsunami and Inari wandering off somewhere. Even by ninja standards, their duel had been a quick one, with the short pre- and post-battle conversations and the walk to and fro actually taking up most of their time. After closing the door, they both took the same seats they had occupied during their meal. So, Tazuna began hesitantly. You two decide not to fight after all? You don't look like anything happened. It takes less skill to kill an opponent than to defeat him without inflicting injury, Naruto sagely replied, not really answering the question. Sakura looked towards her sensei. So does this mean we're taking him back with us? He's not exactly restrained. Naruto snorted with restrained laughter. The girl's faith in her sensei's invulnerability was simply adorable. Sasuke, on the other hand, was a little quicker on the uptake, and spun his head to face the blonde sitting next to him. How? He asked breathlessly, torn between admiration and envy at the thought of someone his age besting his sensei. Naruto took a few moments to decide how to answer that. Fuinjutsu, he explained, is, at its core, a method of altering reality to suit your needs. A user with enough skill, creativity, and preparation can do almost anything. The Yondaime Hokage's greatest achievements were dependent on seals, you know. He gave a knowing glance towards Kakashi, before continuing. And in your sensei's defense, I cheated. Fair fights are for suckers. The blonde sighed gently, before returning his attention to Sasuke. I should probably be getting back to my room at the inn, but I'm debating whether I should enlighten you first. Enlighten me? Sasuke asked, eyes widening slightly. About what? They say ignorance is bliss, Naruto said, seemingly ignoring the question. And if my theory about your clan is right, that knowledge could destroy you. Sure you want to know? A deathly chill permeated the room, one which had nothing to do with temperature. Sasuke glared frostily at the evasive blonde. You don't get to say something like that and then keep the rest to yourself. Naruto gave a morbid laugh in response. No, I suppose keeping it to myself is no longer an option. He then turned to the bridge builder, the only civilian other than himself in the room. Tazuna, you should probably take a walk or something. You're better off not hearing this. Yeah, I got the impression this is going somewhere unpleasant, the old man replied, before standing up and vacating to a different part of the house. Sakura looked like she was tempted to follow, but the desire to support her crush kept her rooted to her seat. Kakashi was merely intrigued, wondering what fresh new revelation Naruto would add to the pile he already had to deal with today. This mission report was going to be interesting, that was for sure. Naruto leaned back in his chair, placing both hands behind his head. First, I have some questions for you all, he stated, adopting the mannerisms of a professor interrogating a student. What do you think the odds are for a ninja clan of hundreds to all be home at the same time? What are the odds that one man would then be able to kill them all, without anyone outside the compound noticing the commotion, or anyone inside the compound escaping? You're saying Itachi had help? Sasuke cut in. He realized that his previous case of childish hero worship had blinded him to the possibility that Itachi might not have been capable of murdering his family without assistance. That is what I'm saying, Naruto confirmed with a melancholy smile. And considering that the Sharingan can supposedly control the Kyuubi, my money's on the Hokage ordering a purge. How else could Itachi ensure they were all in one place, if not with his help? Needless to say, the Konoha ninja were shocked. Before now, they had always trusted in the overall benevolence of their leaders. Even Kakashi, who had seen the darker side of the ninja world, hadn't expected to find such nasty skeletons in Konoha's closet. Suddenly, Naruto's antipathy towards the Hokage made much more sense. It can't be, Sakura feebly protested. Naruto couldn't help but pity the naive girl, who was clearly unprepared to cope with such information. I could be wrong, since all of my evidence is circumstantial, he confessed. But the facts are damn suspicious. I wasn't kidding about this knowledge destroying you, though. If I'm right, and you try to confront the Hokage, you'll die. The old man can be brutal when he thinks it's convenient. So why did you even tell me? Sasuke demanded, his fists clenching tightly on the table. If my brother was following orders, what am I supposed to do about this? What can I do? Shit's fucked up, I know, Naruto replied, his gentle tone not quite meshing with his choice of words. He was tempted to place a comforting hand on Sasuke's shoulder, but he didn't think the Uchiha was the sort who would appreciate the gesture. Even if a member of your clan was behind the Kyuubi attack, that was still just one person out of many. I don't condone the murder of innocents, so I felt you deserved to know. So what now? Sasuke all but yelled. Am I supposed to just keep serving the man who probably ordered the massacre of my entire family? If you're honestly asking for my advice, confront your brother, Naruto answered. Talk to him. He chose to slaughter his family, yet he spared your life. If you want closure, figure out why. He shrugged before continuing his train of thought. As for the old man, he's old. He most likely won't be in power much longer. Kakashi let out a breath, glad that Naruto's reply seemed to reduce Sasuke's anger to a manageable level. Your theory is disturbingly plausible, and this is one conversation I'll be leaving out of the mission report, but you took a bit of a risk telling him in front of me, Naruto. What if I'd been in on it? Naruto smiled softly. A secret that important isn't something they tell to anyone, even you. I figure less than a handful would know besides Itachi and the Hokage himself. Not even the full council would be told, since a purge like this would make the clans nervous. Suddenly, killing intent flooded the room, and Naruto's expression turned malevolent. But I already said I don't condone the murder of innocents. If you had orders to terminate Sasuke if he found out, well, we already know I can kill you. So that's why he waited until after our fight to spring this on us, Kakashi mused, closing his visible eye in concentration. Right now, he could stop me with a thought. For about 10 seconds there was dead silence. Anyway, Naruto clapped his hands and stood up, partially dispelling the grim mood brought on by his threat. I think I've shattered your worldviews enough for one day. Try not to do anything stupid with the information. I don't need your deaths on my conscience. And tell Tsunami I appreciate her hospitality. As he made his way to the front door and opened it, Kakashi interrupted. Naruto. I don't know if it means anything to you, but I think your father would have been proud. Naruto merely nodded before closing the door behind him. The total amount of time he would spend in Wave was less than a week. In the wake of his passage, he left behind a country freed from tyranny, a man filled with regrets, a boy who doubted his chosen path for the first time, and a girl who didn't know what to believe in anymore. Chapter 2, Acts of Charity. Outskirts of Yokohama, port city on western coast of water country. 639th year of the Sage, 12 years after the Kyuubi's attack. What the hell is wrong with this country? Naruto muttered. It was a fair question. He'd only been in the country for a few weeks, offering to design and apply various seals for people and businesses, and he could already see that water was not in good shape. The Mizukage seemed to be using his ninja as secret police, getting rid of anyone he deemed undesirable and ruling the rest by fear alone. Apparently, undesirables included people with bloodlines. The ninja on whose back Naruto was currently seated had taken one look at his whisker-shaped birthmarks, made some false assumptions, and promptly tried to arrest him, a decision which had resulted in Naruto leading him away from the city before casually subduing the man. Speaking of which, that question wasn't rhetorical, jackass, Naruto said, punctuating the statement with a slap to the back of his assailant's head. Make with the talking. Kanagaki Haru, Chunin, registration C2718-. Oh, for fuck's sake, Naruto interrupted. Don't give me that prisoner of war bullshit. I'm not even asking for anything classified. Just tell me why the Mizukage is terrorizing his people and running his nation into the ground. A foreigner, then? His captive asked. I'd rather not advertise our shameful conduct to the world. Naruto scoffed and put a kunai to the Kiri Chunin's neck, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from the helpless captive. You attacked me because I have freaking lines on my face. If you want to live, you'll give me a reason to like you. The ensuing conversation had been enlightening, among other things. Several years ago, the previously respectable Mizukage had taken a flying leap off the deep end and decided to purge any possible source of opposition to his rule. The various ninja clans, being the biggest potential source of internal conflict, had been the ones most heavily targeted. And considering most clans were formed by bloodline carriers, anyone who possessed a bloodline was now subject to arrest and summary execution. Of course, anyone who tried to help them was liable to meet the same fate. The situation had gotten so bad that the common folk in some areas were killing, or driving out, anyone among them who was suspected of carrying a bloodline for fear of the Mizukage's wrath. In the end, the clans and their supporters had no choice but to flee Kiri and begin a guerrilla campaign to try and topple the Mizukage, leading to the very civil war that the Mizukage had claimed he was trying to prevent. The concept of self-fulfilling prophecies had apparently been lost on him. You called this conduct shameful, Naruto said. So why are you supporting it? Haru let out a melancholy sigh. The Mizukage's more fanatical supporters would have punished everyone around you just for tolerating your presence. At least my way is gentler. I would have only taken you. Why do you still serve him at all, if you hate what he's doing? If every moderate leaves his service, the fanatics will be the only ones left. Naruto was a little sympathetic, but part of the explanation didn't seem to mesh. Seems like everyone else who opposes him is actually, opposing him. Yet you're helping him. Why? His captive's downtrodden expression was his only answer. You don't think the rebels can win? It wasn't a question, though Haru's nod answered anyway. With a groan, Naruto got to his feet and helped his captive up, a gesture which seemed to surprise the older man. The boy made to leave the area, but as he was walking away he turned around to address the Chunin one last time. I understand your position, but there are limits to what I can excuse because of orders. Naruto began, fixing his former opponent with a glare. Don't let me see you doing this type of thing again. You won't survive my disappointment. Inland Village. 1 week later. The main reason Naruto had kept up his combat training was because of the possibility of Konoha trying to reclaim him. That, and his ability to make numerous Kage Bunshin meant he had no shortage of man-hours in the day with which to practice, and thus no excuse for slacking off. 5 years of that sort of training had made him one of the most capable fighters in the world at the tender age of 12. Regardless of his skill, it had never been his intention to get involved with other people's problems. He had never wanted to use his abilities in a war that didn't concern him. But while he was content to let ninja kill each other till the end of time, his brusque demeanor hid a surprisingly gentle soul. There were some things he simply couldn't ignore. He had only been making a brief stop in a small woodland village during his journey. With a population of only a few hundred, there was nothing that should have attracted any attention to the quaint village. So when a team of 4 Kiri ninja marched into town with a purpose, Naruto felt compelled to find out what they were hoping to accomplish and carefully followed them. Once the 3 males and 1 female reached the center of the village and had everyone's attention, the squad leader made his announcement. It has come to the attention of the Mizukage that this village is harboring a traitorous bloodline wielder in its midst. You will surrender him to us immediately. They can't be referring to me, can they? Naruto thought, safely hidden in a spot where he could hear everything. Seriously, I don't even have a bloodline, and I can't be a traitor to a country I've only been in for little over a month. He didn't think Haru was the sort to sell him out, but it wasn't as though he'd never been wrong before. The villagers were in a near panic, most having no idea who the ninja were talking about, but comprehending that their lives were suddenly in jeopardy. This is the only time I'm going to repeat myself, the squad leader shouted. If he does not appear before me, you will all suffer for it. Naruto tensed in anticipation, despite knowing he was fast enough to simply leave if he chose to. But this wasn't something he could turn his back on. If it was him they wanted, He couldn't let these people die for just being in the same place for a day. His intervention seemed to prove unnecessary, however, when he observed another man step forward out of the crowd. The scarred, dark-haired villager was obviously a former ninja, and Naruto assumed he was the one the team was looking for. Crisis averted, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. If ninja want to kill each other over politics, that's their problem. I'm staying out of it. Even as the thought crossed his mind, it felt hollow and unsatisfying. It was obvious who was in the wrong here, and simply ignoring the blatant injustice left a bad taste in his mouth. He was just preparing to make a stealthy exit when a gurgling sound, the thud of a body hitting the ground, and numerous gasps reached his ears. What? They couldn't even take him out of the village and back to Kiri before they slit his throat? Assholes. Unfortunately, it wasn't laziness that led the team to kill their quarry in the middle of a crowd of shocked onlookers. They still had business with the village. By order of the Mizukage, this village is to be made an example. Those who harbor traitors will share their fate. With that statement, the rest of his team drew their weapons and prepared for a massacre. I can still leave. They don't know I'm here, and I'm way faster than the average. Naruto's inner monologue trailed off, as anger began to dominate his thoughts. Oh, who am I kidding? Fuck neutrality. I'm putting an end to this. Before the Kiri team could begin their grisly task, Naruto advanced through the fleeing, screaming crowd to grab their attention. Stop right there, evildoers! He yelled, adding to the intentional overacting by pointing dramatically. Pretending to be a moron in Konoha had taught him the value of being underestimated by one's enemies. Sure enough, the ninja all paused to look at him, raised eyebrows asking if he was really that stupid. This should buy enough time for everyone to get out of the way. Who the hell are you? The cocky-looking punk to the right of the squad leader asked, as the village square quickly emptied around them. I am the champion of justice, Naruto replied, slipping into his role like a natural. I am the light in the grim darkness of a grimdark world. Those who would prey upon the innocent beware. For my fist shall punch evil in the dick, right before I steal evil's wallet. He then gestured to his whiskered cheeks, remembering his previous scuffle with a Kiri nin. And check out these weird birthmarks. I've got, like, a dozen bloodlines and shit. All the better with which to oppose your villainy. The leader facepalmed in exasperation. Kenji, he said, looking at the same ninja who had previously spoken. Do humanity a favor, and remove this idiot from the gene pool. With pleasure, Captain. The man now identified as Kenji replied, and began advancing menacingly towards Naruto. The rest of the team turned aside, preparing to cut off the civilians' escape routes from the village, which prevented them from seeing the quick and utterly one-sided battle between their hardened ninja comrade and a 12-year-old civilian boy. When they heard a body hit the ground, they assumed it was the foolish child who had perished. But the voice that addressed them next was not their teammates. I don't think you understand the situation. Acting in surprised unison, the three remaining ninja turned back towards the child. The body of their teammate lay cooling face up on the ground in front of him, throat violently cut, with a similar look of shock on his own face as they possessed. The boy was calmly wiping a bloody kunai on the dead man's clothing, his current grin showing far too much teeth to be mistaken as friendly. You came here to kill these people. I came here to stop you. Naruto stood up from his crouch and kicked the dead ninja's body for emphasis. One side is going to end up disappointed and dead. Think you jokers can afford to take this lightly? With a yell of grief and rage, the man and woman who had previously been silent charged forward, intent on taking Naruto's life. Their more level-headed squad leader followed shortly after them, obviously hoping to take advantage of any openings his more impetuous subordinates created. With 3 experienced ninja attacking him head-on, and his own skills largely untested in serious combat, Naruto decided to stack the odds in his favor. His first move was to retreat out of the village and up into the nearby trees as his enemies pursued. While he may have left Konoha behind, he was still a native of the village hidden in the leaves and had lived there for most of his life. He bet his skill in woodland combat against that of any Kiri nin. First rule of fighting a seal user, Naruto said to himself as he came up with a battle plan, don't follow the seal user into terrain that he has had time to prepare. He paused on a large tree limb, taking just enough time to put his hand on the trunk and inscribe an explosive seal with his chakra before moving on, high yield, because he didn't do anything halfway. Chakra inscription was one of many neat tricks that Kurama had taught him in their time together, ordinary sealing materials being hard to afford on an orphan stipend, and not used by the Bija anyway, and while he could still only do it quickly with relatively basic seals, he was constantly improving. Addendum: a seal master can prepare terrain in seconds. Sure enough, the Kiri nin were not as adept at navigating in the trees as he was, so they used the same obvious path he did. He slipped around another tree for cover, and detonated the seal when he estimated one of his pursuers would be close enough to it. As the sound of the blast reverberated through the area, he made out a pair of opposite-gendered screams mixed in, and knew his trap had been even more successful than he expected. 2 for 1, he thought with a grim smile. That leaves only one more. These fuckwads aren't much of a challenge. Sure enough, a discreet peek at the situation revealed that the team had been effectively neutralized. The squad leader was dead, and in pieces. The female laying on the ground was so badly injured that she might as well be dead, and the last survivor was shaking in terror, torn between wanting to flee and trying to keep the woman's organs where they belong. Seeing that he had the situation well under control, Naruto readied his kunai and charged his remaining foe. The man raised a short sword to defend himself, but Naruto merely charged wind chakra through his own weapon and cut right through the blade. His remaining adversary wisely tried to dodge the second attack after seeing the futility of blocking, but wind chakra could lengthen a blade as well as sharpen. The next swing removed the man's right arm at the elbow, and a cry of pain filled the air as he collapsed to the ground. Please don't kill me," he pleaded, desperately trying to crawl backwards with his one good arm. That's rich. He would murder hundreds of innocents, yet he's begging for mercy? Naruto thought grimly, glaring into the eyes of his cowering enemy. And yet, even knowing his foe deserved to die couldn't stop him from hesitating. Bah, Kurama would call me a softie. But if I'm seriously going to get involved, this guy may be useful. If you want to live, Naruto began, you need a tourniquet for that arm. Closing the distance with the seated man, he used his kunai to cut some of the cloth from the ninja's clothing in order to staunch the bleeding. As he began tying off the stump of the arm, the wounded man looked on in stunned silence, having a hard time comprehending that his plea for mercy had been effective. You're letting me live? He timidly asked. Naruto nodded, biting back the urge to insult him for asking stupid questions. Having finished stemming the blood flow as best he could, he turned towards the barely conscious woman and walked towards her. But rather than make any attempt at field medicine, he simply plunged his kunai into her heart. The remaining life in her eyes vanished swiftly, as she left the world without a sound. You! The man trailed off, wanting to express his anger but kept in check by his fear. Spare me the righteous indignation, Naruto replied, turning back towards him. Unless your name is Senjutsu Nade, she was beyond saving. Or were you hoping I'd let her suffer? The man made no response, merely keeping a wary gaze on Naruto as the boy walked towards him again. My mercy has conditions, Naruto said, looking the ninja in the eyes while standing over him. First, your arm stays here. Consider this the end of your ninja career, since you can't seem to use your power responsibly. The man whimpered, understandably upset at the prospect of not being able to get it reattached, but Naruto pressed on before he could interrupt. Second, you'll be delivering my declaration of war to the Mizukage. The wounded man went wide-eyed for a moment, before he began laughing hysterically. Maybe he was going into shock, or maybe the statement was just that absurd to his ears, but he just couldn't seem to stop himself. You think you can challenge him alone? He asked, gasping for air as he stifled his giggling with incredible effort. Good question, Naruto secretly thought. What am I getting myself into this time? I'm already hunted by one hidden village. I don't need another on my ass. Outwardly, he refused to show his doubts. Well, I sure as hell don't intend to waste the rest of my life killing pawns, he said, with a derisive gesture towards the two nearby bodies. You idiots are just the symptom. If the Mizukage is man enough to leave his hole, I'll solve this problem at the source. You're serious, aren't you? The one-armed man replied, suddenly experiencing doubts of his own in the face of the seemingly confident boy that had just annihilated his team. In that moment, he felt certain he was witnessing the birth of a legend. Deadly serious, as you might have noticed, said Naruto, no trace of humor in his visage despite the pun. Now get up and start heading for Kiri. You still need proper medical attention eventually if you want to live, and it'd be embarrassing if my messenger died before delivery. 3 kilometers from the main entrance of Kirigakure. 2 days later. Of course, waging a one-man war against a tyrannical government was easier said than done. Naruto wasn't stupid enough to think he could just waltz into Kiri and kill the Mizukage in his den without any sort of information on Kiri's defenses. He also didn't believe that the Mizukage would be courteous enough to leave the village and meet him in honorable combat, and Naruto didn't feel like challenging a Kage to a fair fight anyway. So despite his desire to target the Mizukage directly, all he could really do at the moment was attack those of his ninja who were up to no good and wait for an opportunity to reveal itself. But Kiri had an army of ninja hunting for wayward clans and fighting the rebels. If he was going to put a stop to their actions, he would have to occupy their attention all by himself. In order to fight an army, he needed a proper army-killing jutsu. Given his mastery of Fuinjutsu, there was one solution that immediately came to mind. He'd cracked the secret of space-folding seals a while ago, but he had never had a reason to use them in combat before. However, if he was going to stop a large, spread-out enemy force single-handedly, he needed a way to traverse vast distances quickly and take out individual units by surprise. It was time for the world to bear witness to the Horatians' rebirth. His plan was a simple one, as he knew that complex plans had a nasty habit of falling apart. He had found a good spot near the main road out of Kiri, and would observe the ninja teams leaving the village. For each team, he would send a Kage Bunshin to shadow them, armed with a single Horatian-marked kunai. If the team engaged in acts of aggression against non-combatants, the Kage Bunshin would disperse, and Naruto would warp in to dispatch them. If the team was innocent, he'd simply collect his kunai and leave them be. Since he knew this plan would be taxing, even on his formidable reserves, he set himself a few additional rules of engagement. Seeing as water was an island nation, separate from the rest of the elemental countries, any team that had business outside its borders had to carry plenty of supplies. Therefore, he'd ignore those packed for a long trip and focus his attention on the comparatively lightly equipped squads that were more likely to be terrorizing water itself. He also understood that he probably couldn't save everyone, no matter how hard he tried, so he reminded himself to only challenge one squad at a time. He was no good to anyone if he overextended and got himself killed. His biggest concern had been the possibility of being detected by the teams he was shadowing, as they would likely attack him regardless of whether or not he had any intention of harming them. To assist in tracking them safely, he had quickly whipped up another seal design which warned him of any large chakra sources and displayed their relative locations. It was nowhere near as good as being an actual chakra sensor, since he couldn't detect the number of ninja or how powerful they were, and only got a very rough idea of their direction and range. Unfortunately, true chakra sensory was a 1 in 1,000 talent among ninja, and Naruto hadn't lucked out. While it was within his abilities to make a more precise detection array like those used to defend villages, they required more space than he had skin to put them on, even when miniaturized as much as possible. And here come the first test subjects, he thought, as the seal on the back of his hand warned of nearby chakra signatures. A Kage Bunshin came to life with a thought and set off in pursuit of the Kiri, using the matching seal on its own hand to keep a safe distance. The original simply settled into his campsite, aware that he might be called into action by the mental feedback at any moment. Time to go to war. Woodland near Kirigakure. 23 days later. Kazuhiro was frustrated. For over 3 weeks now, an unknown agent had been wiping out the majority of purge teams sent out from Kirigakure. A crippled survivor from the first known incident claimed that it was the result of a single boy, and the analysts agreed that the cases appeared to be the result of a solitary attacker striking from ambush. After about a week of mounting losses, and no results from conventional methods, the Mizukage had given him command of a massive search and destroy mission, composed of 40 ninja, 10 full teams. They were among the best hunters Kiri had, and should have been far more than enough to find and kill any single person, no matter how good they were. For 2 weeks, they had known only failure. On several occasions, they had engaged in battle with their mysterious enemy, only for him to slip away before they could bring their superior numbers to bear. In the meantime, he had managed to continue his assaults on isolated purge teams, until such missions had been halted indefinitely. If his goal was merely to stop the purges, he had technically succeeded already, if only in the short term. 2 weeks of hunting him, and all Kazuhiro had to show for it were casualties. Roughly a third of his platoon were now dead or seriously injured, and several others seemed to be contemplating defection, either because they were terrified, or because they were inspired. If the next skirmish ended as previous ones had, they'd be forced to return to Kiri in defeat. "Team 4 to command, we have contact!" The radio bud in his ears squawked. Kazuhiro brought the transmitter hooked to his waist up to his mouth to relay instructions, forming a mental image of where all his teams should be. "Command to 4, flank him and wait for reinforcements. Don't let him out of sight. 2 and 7, close in and engage. All other teams, form a perimeter and tighten it around him." As the teams confirmed their orders and moved to obey, he led his own team in the direction that Team 4 had been scouting, hoping that this would be the day they successfully closed the noose. Off in the distance, a powerful explosion suddenly erupted, sending dirt and debris much higher into the air than what a normal explosive tag would ever accomplish. Even at this range, he could feel the concussive force generated by the blast. Their enemy apparently fancied himself a seal master, and those damnable exploding traps of his were now rightly feared by all of Kazuhiro's ninja. He would have been amused by a young boy showing such interest in massive explosions, if it hadn't been his own people getting torn apart. As he continued to advance upon the enemy and sort through incoming status reports, he heard the words he dreaded. "He disappeared," announced Team 7's leader. Kazuhiro growled in barely suppressed fury. Trackers, can you get any trace of him this time? People don't just vanish into thin air. One moment, we're arriving at his last known position. By the time they had any information for him, he had already arrived, rendering the radios unnecessary. The teams he had ordered to engage were mainly clustered around a single point and gesturing at the ground. In the distance, he could see traces of the explosion and his medics tending to some prone bodies. Report. He barked at the commander of Team 2, who was also second in command of the entire platoon. It's just like every other time, disappears as soon as more than one team tries to close in. The adjutant sighed. Everyone was feeling exhausted by the string of failures. There's no trace of scent or tracks to follow beyond the point where he vanished, and even our sensor isn't picking anything up. But 4 and 7 swear he didn't disperse like a clone would. TCH. Kazuhiro hissed, fist clenching in irritation. The bastard's dragging us around by the tail, and we don't even understand how. Casualties? 1 dead, 2 severely injured, 1 more walking wounded. His second looked apologetic, knowing how much his commander hated to lose. Looks like we'll have to return empty-handed after all. The platoon's no longer combat-ready in its current state. I know, Kazuhiro grunted. Just because it was necessary didn't mean he had to like it. Get the wounded ready to move as soon as possible. We'll just have to report our findings, and hope our analysts can come up with a better plan to deal with him. He didn't voice the thought to his subordinates, but something about whatever technique the blonde kid was using to run rings around them tickled his brain. It reminded him of stories he'd heard about the Iwa Konoha front of the Third Shinobi War. But that couldn't be possible. Rebel encampment. 6 hours later. It was near the end of the day, during a routine status briefing, when the rebel leadership found their meeting interrupted. They had been standing around a table, looking at a large map with figurines representing troop placements, as the news arrived. Terumi-sama, said the messenger, standing at the entrance of the command tent. The hunting party you told us to keep an eye on has withdrawn back to Kirigakure. A middle-aged man with an eye patch laughed at the news. Have finally retreated to lick their wounds, eh? Hard to believe one person could give them the runaround. Terumi Mei, leader of the rebel forces, turned towards him after a moment of thought. Now that their target is no longer being actively pursued, I'd like you to go and extend an invitation to him, AO. We'll never get a better opportunity. A momentary silence followed her proclamation. You're serious about this, aren't you? One of her senior officers spoke, expressing his discontent. You're going to send our second-in-command by himself to meet up with an unknown foreigner and invite him into the very heart of the rebellion? A coy smile graced her features. It was a fair concern, and she wasn't the sort to punish her subordinates for making valid observations, just one of many reasons she commanded tremendous loyalty among those who opposed the Mizukage. Even as you call him a threat, you continue to underestimate him. He has single-handedly slain dozens of the Mizukage's most fanatical killers. Purges in outlying areas have ground to a halt solely because of him. At this, she let out a melodious chuckle, as though she were privy to a joke that no one else understood. Of the people and villages he saves, most go on to openly support us. Many who formerly served the Mizukage out of fear now believe he can be beaten, and are defecting to us in droves. Furthermore, tying up loyalist manpower in that hunting party has allowed us to gain ground in several regions. She paused for a few seconds to let the implications sink in, before addressing those who doubted her once more. It would be no exaggeration to say that much of the credit for our recent successes can be attributed to him. Now, does anyone here still believe the Mizukage would do so much damage to his own cause, just to plant a single spy among us? Only silence met her words, and she smiled once more. I didn't think so. Woodland near Kirigakure. 12 hours later. Naruto, having managed to get a good night's sleep without interruption, decided that his annoying pursuers must have given up for now and resolved to get some much-needed rest. He had been running himself ragged the past few weeks, between ambushing purge teams all over the country and evading ambushes himself. Grudgingly, he would admit to being impressed by the tracking skills of the ones that had been hunting him, as even using clones to create false trails didn't seem to buy him more than a few hours at a time. Now that he had no one he needed to kill, and no one trying to kill him, he could finally spare some time to relax. Despite how troublesome this whole mess had been, he was content with his accomplishments thus far. He'd never expected to play the role of the stereotypical hero after swearing off becoming a ninja. Not that he thought shinobi were entirely heroic, after everything he'd seen, but there was a certain satisfaction to be found in protecting the weak and innocent. He felt he might get addicted, if he wasn't careful. The past few weeks had also done wonders for his fighting abilities. While he'd been extremely skilled to begin with, This was the first real chance he had to test those skills against anyone other than the occasional bandit who mistook a lone child for easy prey. A few close calls in his first battles had tempered his skill with much-needed experience, and made him all the more deadly for it. But enough of such weighty matters, he said to himself with a smile. I'm taking the next few days off. Feels nice to have nothing to do, after all that running around. Whistling a light-hearted tune to himself, he reached into one of his pant pockets, and pulled out a storage scroll with various necessities locked away. One puff of smoke later, and he had a cup of ramen and a supply of fresh water. Now he just needed to start a fire, boil the latter, and pour it into the former to have himself a pleasant breakfast. The trail rations and occasional wild game he'd been surviving off of for the past few weeks were healthier by far, but he felt he deserved a treat. Or not, he interrupted himself, as the seal on the back of his hand tingled in warning. Bastards! They just had to interfere with ramen time. With a sigh, he resealed his cooking supplies and oriented himself in the direction the seal indicated a foreign chakra was approaching from. He'd honestly thought they'd given up hunting him for a while, but it seemed he'd have to give them another bloody nose. Strange that the enemy wasn't moving very fast. Before he could even see his opponent, a calm, masculine voice called out to him. So this is the boy that has been causing the loyalists so much pain? Slowly walking into the clearing was one of the more distinctive-looking men Naruto had ever seen. The eye patch and blue-tinted hair contributed heavily to that impression, though Naruto's professional side also noted the complex seals that served as the man's earrings. You've been making waves recently, boy. Seems like everyone is taking notice of your actions. Sup? Naruto replied curtly, not really in the mood for whatever verbal foreplay the mystery man was trying to draw him into. His chakra detection seal wasn't precise enough to tell him if this was the only person in the area, so he remained alert for more company. The man closed his visible eye and seemed to concentrate for several seconds before smirking. Interesting seals you have on your kunai. Given what I've heard about your performance, I can make a pretty good guess as to what those are. Given that said kunai were still secured in his weapon pouches, the statement managed to shock Naruto considerably, though he did an excellent job of keeping his feelings from showing. In attempting to figure out how the man knew so much, he returned his focus to the seal earrings and made a fascinating discovery of his own. Interesting seals you have on your ears. High-level barrier seals, configured to protect your covered eye socket. I'm guessing that socket isn't empty, and given that you can see through objects, I can make a pretty good guess as to what bloodline is transplanted there. Now it was the unknown man's turn to be surprised, as Naruto smirked victoriously. That's right, asshole, you're not the only one whose secrets are out in the open. Still, Naruto wasn't a huge fan of mind games, so he decided to speed things up a little. So, what do you want? If you came here to kill me, you should probably go get some of your friends first. Seems I forgot to introduce myself, said the man, raising his hands to show he had no hostile intentions. Name's Ao, and I'm here on behalf of Terumi-Mei. She was hoping to meet you. And this is someone I should care about? Asked Naruto, his expression deadpan. He hadn't been paying too much attention to local politics beyond the whole crazy Mizukage issue, and he'd been spending most of the last 3 weeks in the wilderness, only stopping briefly at isolated villages to resupply, whenever scavenging from his enemies wasn't enough. Ao offered a friendly smile in response. She's only the leader of the rebellion, kid. Given how much you've done to help our cause, she'd like to coordinate our efforts with you. Took them long enough, Naruto thought, standing down from his alert state. He'd honestly been expecting someone from the resistance to seek him out sooner, but they were more cautious than he had expected. Well, if you're not here to fight me to the death, give me a few minutes, he said, unsealing his ramen once more. I think I deserve a break before I get back to that whole war business. Rebel encampment. 8 hours later. Naruto had to admit that the rebels seemed to be in surprisingly good shape. From what little he'd seen of them as he passed through the base, they were both disciplined and motivated. No wonder they'd managed to put up a strong fight for years, with no signs of backing down. This Terumi person obviously knew her stuff if she managed to keep her army intact for so long. Just outside the command tent, Ao called a sudden halt to their 2-man march. If you'll wait out here for a minute, I need to have a quick word with her. Off to give her your first impressions, huh? Naruto muttered before shrugging his shoulders. It's not like you're gonna tell her something I don't already know, but I suppose it's only proper to do your gossiping behind my back. Ao rolled his eyes, though the suppressed smirk showed his true feelings. You're one weird kid, you know that? No one ever accused me of being normal, Naruto replied with a wan smile. People like himself weren't usually the products of happy lives, though he was one of the lucky few who managed to leave their problems in the past. He knew not everyone was so fortunate. Ao disappeared through the portal into the tent, and Naruto resigned himself to wait, having had some prior experience with important people taking him far too lightly. It came as a pleasant surprise, then, when Ao reappeared before he could start twiddling his thumbs and told him the boss was ready to see him. Maybe they were actually serious about this alliance, after all. Inside the tent, he immediately noticed 3 people other than himself and Ao. 2 males, probably bodyguards, were positioned to attack him if he tried anything, while seated at a desk was a surprisingly attractive redhead wearing a low-cut dress which did an excellent job of emphasizing her assets. "How the hell do you fight in that outfit?" Ao snorted, May bore an amused grin, and the 2 unknowns were glaring mildly at him. Only then did he realize something important. "I said that out loud, didn't I?" "It's easier than you'd think, and a good way to be underestimated," May responded, recovering admirably from the blunt question. "So you're Uzumaki Naruto, the boy who decided to challenge the loyalists alone?" She gave him a knowing smirk before continuing, one which made Naruto immensely uncomfortable. "The last time a blonde, blue-eyed young man with strange seals on his kunai got involved in a war, he ended up turning the tide almost single-handedly. It seems you're already well on your way to surpassing him." She leaned back in her chair, appearing confident in the accuracy of her implied deduction. Naruto groaned. "Is it really that obvious? Sure didn't seem like anyone in Konoha could figure it out on their own. Admittedly, had I not known your skills, I might have assumed the resemblance was coincidental. But that does lead me to an important question: why is the Yondaime Hokage's heir running around in Kiri territory, getting involved in our problems?" Naruto scratched the back of his head, mildly embarrassed. "If your Mizukage was only going after political rivals and such, I'd have happily stayed out of it. But when I saw a team about to slaughter an entire village, I decided to express my displeasure. And then I went and repeated the lesson a few times, 'cause the Mizukage thugs are slow learners." A nonchalant shrug followed, before he continued. "Plus there was that time some moron tried to arrest me for my non-existent bloodline. Kinda pissed me off." "Kanagaki Haru, if I'm not mistaken," May interrupted. Seeing that Naruto was wondering how the hell she knew about that, she elaborated. "One of our more recent recruits. He defected not too long ago, and told us all about his encounter with the person carving a bloody path through loyalist purge teams." "Neat," Naruto replied, pleased that the man had decided to do the right thing after all. "Tell him I'm not disappointed. He'll understand." "You haven't answered the original question," exclaimed one of the unknown men in a frosty tone. "Why did you come here in the first place? Does Konoha seek to take advantage of our turmoil? Why are you even talking?" Naruto asked himself, mentally renaming the unfriendly man bastard. This meeting was supposed to be between him and the rebel leader, maybe Ao too, and he'd been surprised by the rude interruption from some nobody he'd all but forgotten. It was as if a piece of furniture had suddenly decided to call his mother a whore. "Hey man, I don't work for Konoha, or anyone else," Naruto answered, turning his head to glare at Bastard. "And you're the ones who came to me. If you can't trust me, I'll just be on my way. You know our base's location, and have seen its layout." Bastard sneered. "We can't let you leave with that information." "You won't be able to stop me," Naruto challenged, preparing to jump to one of the many Horatian seals that were now dotting water country. "I've gotten pretty good at running away, and making my attackers bleed in the process." "Enough," May firmly spoke, standing up in a manner calculated to engrave her authority on the subconscious of everyone present. With the minute amount of killing intent she used for emphasis, she seemed to radiate beauty and power in equal measure. Naruto could easily understand how such a woman could command the respect of the men around her, even in the male-dominated fields of killing people and breaking things. Fortunately, her ire seemed to be reserved for Bastard, who quickly backed down. Whatever Bastard's opinions might be, she had made it clear that she trusted, and was siding with, Naruto. Idly, he scratched at the back of his hand, where the detection seal was constantly tingling, and reminded himself to remove it when he had some free time. It was damned useful when fighting solo, but incredibly annoying now that he was hanging out with friendly ninja. Still, the design had proven its worth, and he resolved to keep working on it. "So," he trailed off, dispelling the air of imminent violence that permeated the tent. "Back to the war. How do we whack the Mizukage?" May sighed, and sat back down. "We've tried that before. It's not so simple a task." "Sure it is," Naruto contradicted. "I didn't say it was easy, but it's plenty simple. This fight only ends when you remove him. So figure out what's stopping you from doing that. What are the obstacles you need to overcome? You must have people in Kiri who can tell you about his defenses." "Tell us about them, certainly," she replied, sending a warning glare over to Bastard, who looked like he was about to get mouthy again. "Overcoming those defenses is another matter entirely. He practically lives in the main administration building, which has numerous detection, alarm, and barrier seals that we've so far been unable to crack. What are you laughing at? Naruto had proven unable to contain his sudden good cheer, and what had started as light chuckles had transformed into full-blown, maniacal, cliché supervillain laughter. It was the best-case scenario for him. He hadn't dared try forcing his way into Kiri on his own, as a village's defensive grid was composed of numerous complex seal arrays. Between them and the regular patrols, even the world's greatest seal master, which was probably himself, would be unlikely to avoid triggering something. Unless, of course, he had inside information. It was the very reason why he'd been hoping the rebels would reach out to him. Composing himself with considerable force of will, he ignored the wary looks everyone was giving him and got back to business. I'll let you in on a little secret. I've never seen the Yondaime Hokage's Hiraishin, or the seals it uses. He merely provided me with inspiration. I designed my technique without help from him, or anyone else. Shock and disbelief were evident in the other occupants of the tent, which brought a smile to his face. So you mentioned having trouble with seals? Do go on. Kirigakure, Administrative Building. 3 days later. And that should be the last one, Naruto hummed, deactivating the final layer of defensive seals from the door of the Mizuki's office. It was the dead of night, and the information provided by the rebels, combined with his own talents, had allowed him to penetrate to the very heart of Kirigakure undetected. May had been worried when he first told her about his plan, pointing out that failure here would compromise many of their informants within Kiri. The Loyalists would undoubtedly investigate any breach in security, change their routines, and arrest anyone suspected of leaking intel. Naruto had, in return, pointed out that the information was useless anyway if they didn't take advantage of it, and had convinced her that the prospect of ending the war in one fell swoop was worth the risk. The next couple of days had been spent reviewing everything they had regarding seal layouts and patrol routes, until Naruto knew them all by heart. The building was as well defended as he would expect from a village at war, but May's informants had proven themselves reliable. No one was present when he entered the office, just as he'd expected and hoped. He still had no intention of fighting the Mizuki directly, and even trying to catch him asleep in his bed was too risky for Naruto's taste. Instead, he walked over to the Mizuki's impressive-looking chair and began carefully planting hidden seals. He'd been assured that chakra sensors, being rare and valuable, would not be brought in to sweep the room unless there was already reason to believe that someone had broken in. So he touched none of the documents. Despite the obvious temptation, anything juicy would have been locked in the records vault at the end of the day, anyway, and reactivated all the seals on the door. One Hiraishin spacefold later, and he had successfully escaped a locked room. How'd it go? Ao asked him, as Naruto reappeared in the small staging area they had chosen near Kiri. May's executive officer was the only one waiting for him, as numbers wouldn't help with Naruto's plan in any way. The blonde had initially offered to handle everything himself, but May insisted on having one of her own people present, and pointed out that Ao's undisclosed talents, which Naruto already knew about, and May knew he knew would help them avoid trouble. Seeing as no one jumped me, they're either planning some incredibly cunning and fiendish trap, or I'm better at Fuinjutsu than anyone in Kiri, Naruto said in reply. He knew which possibility he was betting on, though Ao didn't look quite so confident. Ignoring his partner's discomfiture at his words, Naruto made himself comfortable and rested his eyes. The next step was just a matter of time. Mizuki's office. 6 hours later. It seemed an ordinary morning to the Yondaime Mizuki Yagura. He had awoken bright and early, as was his custom, and after breakfast he made the short trip to the administrative building accompanied by the usual 2 bodyguards. Their routine sweep of the area revealed nothing out of place, and no seals disturbed. Once they were satisfied with the safety of his office, Yagura sat down in his chair without the slightest hesitation and prepared himself for another average day of ruling over a ninja village during wartime. His first inkling of trouble was when he felt his chakra network suddenly go haywire. As a Jinchuriki, his chakra was wild at the best of times, but never had he felt it coil and twist upon itself so chaotically. His eyes widened, and he attempted to stand up. Attempted being the key word. Instead of standing with the grace one would expect from a master ninja, his body violently twitched and shuddered. Then he tilted forward, and his forehead painfully collided with the desk as his body went limp in the chair. Naruto's eyes shot open, the warning seal he had placed informing him that the others had gone active. Moment of truth, Naruto. Don't fuck it up, he thought as he sat up from his prone position. Well, that's my cue, he informed Ao, who had been kind enough to take watch for the rest of the night. Better get over there before his goons manage to figure out what's going on. He disappeared before Ao could offer a reply. Yagura's bodyguards, not being complete morons, immediately realized that something unpleasant had happened to their leader. One of them promptly opened the door to the office and stuck his head outside. "Summon a medical team. Something's wrong with the Mizukage," he directed to the secretary, a young kunoichi who'd been severely wounded in battle and been given a desk job while she recuperated. No civilian needed to see the sorts of things that crossed the Kage's desk, after all. "Surprise attack!" came a cheerful yell from inside the office, which belonged to either his partner or the Mizukage. Upon turning back towards the room, he saw a young boy, probably not even a teenager, standing at the Mizukage's side with a hand on the defenseless leader's shoulder. His subconscious nagged at him, until he realized with mute horror that the boy's appearance matched the description of the one who had recently chewed up an entire platoon of skilled ninja and sent them packing. The second guard growled, readying a kunai. "How did you get in here? We were covering the only entrance." "Guess I'm just that awesome," the boy replied with a cheeky smile. "Anyway, I'm borrowing your boss. Don't wait up for him." He disappeared, along with Yagura, just as abruptly as he had arrived, the kunai thrown by the second guard passing through the space his head had previously occupied. The first guard stuck his head out the door once more. "Call every available tracking team, the Mizukage's been kidnapped." Woodland near Kirigakure. Same time. When he reappeared, helpless Mizukage in tow, Naruto noticed that Ao was already packing up their campsite. His inert passenger was placed on the ground, and Naruto shot his partner an exuberant grin. "And that is how I won the war. The end." "Not quite, kid," Ao responded, not pausing for a moment. "Even from this range, I can see how badly you jostled the beehive. They'll be desperate because of this, and desperate enemies are the most dangerous kind. Even if his followers decide to keep fighting, we got the instigator," Naruto said, walking over to help Ao pack. "Mei obviously thinks that's worth a lot, or she wouldn't have given me the information I needed to pull it off." "Kill me." Naruto and Ao both looked at the other, wondering if the odd, soft-spoken request was made by their partner. When they each drew a blank, they looked towards the only other person within half a kilometer, and witnessed something that shocked them to the core. "Is he crying?" Naruto had certain preconceptions regarding the 5 Kage, thanks to his interaction with the Sandaime Hokage, and what he was witnessing simply did not compute. Lying on the ground, almost completely paralyzed, a man who was supposed to be a nutcase tyrant now had tear stains marring his cheeks. Naruto, not one to be frozen in indecision for long, walked up and knelt beside Yagura. "When I heard you were a madman, I wasn't expecting the suicidal kind. What's up?" Yagura's eyes focused on Naruto's face with an exertion of will, and his mouth hesitantly went through the motions of speech. I've done so many terrible things. That man, he magnified every suspicion, every resentment I ever had, until they became all that I was. I've nearly destroyed everything I held dear." With a shuddering breath and a distraught hiccup, he labored on. "Even now, I can feel his power, caressing my mind, looking for an opening. I'm a threat to Kiri, I have to be killed." "Ao! Get over here!" Naruto shouted behind him, thoroughly weirded out by his babbling prisoner. While the possibility of insanity still existed, the man's words hinted at an even darker reason behind his actions. Fortunately, Mei had generously provided him with the one man who could reach a decisive conclusion. As Ao strolled up beside him, Naruto issued his instructions. "I need you to have a peek at his brain." Ao looked doubtful. "You really think someone could plant a genjutsu on the Mizukage for years on end? I find that harder to believe than the alternative." "Just look in his damn head," Naruto snapped at him. "It's not like it's gonna cost you anything to check, and if I'm right." With an exasperated sigh, Ao focused his stolen Byakugan to peer inside the Mizukage's skull. Genjutsu normally worked by sending chakra inside an opponent's brain and nerve endings to manipulate their senses, but an extremely proficient user would be capable of altering someone's mentality. Something like what the blonde was insinuating was theoretically possible, but such a complicated technique would be easily broken by anyone who was roughly equivalent in skill. For the Mizukage, of all people, to be ensnared, it would mean that someone of truly frightening power and ability was attempting to tear apart Kirigakure from the inside out. "Shit," Ao muttered under his breath. "That's the sound of someone who just got proven wrong," Naruto replied, though there wasn't a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "So? I don't have chakra vision. Why don't you describe what you see for the rest of the class?" Even Yagura looked interested in hearing the results, or as interested as someone who could barely move could make himself look. Clearly, he wanted to know more about who had been messing with his head, and why. Mindful that loyalist ninja were scouring the area by now, Ao decided to give them the short version. "There's chakra all over his brain, but most of it isn't concentrated in sensory processing regions like ordinary genjutsu. It's focused in parts responsible for higher reasoning. He still observes the same things anyone else does, but this genjutsu would make him respond to it in a different way. Or at least it did. He trailed off, looking at Naruto. But whatever seal you used to scramble his chakra network is also scrambling the genjutsu. Bad news is, it's a self-repairing genjutsu, and it's still trying to reform. You realize this changes everything? Naruto asked, mind whirling with possibilities. We didn't capture the responsible party. Someone else is behind everything. Now's probably not the time to get into a long-winded discussion. Ao cautioned, heedful of the time constraints they were under. A quick reaction team is getting dangerously close to our position. Right. Grab onto me, then. Minutes later, the luckiest of the loyalist team stumbled on the remains of an empty campsite. Rebel encampment. Half an hour later. We're not killing him, Naruto said, soft tone contrasting with the determined expression that would accept no other outcome. After their arrival, they'd placed Yagura under heavy guard, with Naruto's seals still in place. Once Mei's people had asked him a few questions, Naruto and Ao had had a private meeting with Mei to discuss what they had learned and what they would do about it. Naruto, predictably, had his own ideas. He's still a threat, Ao countered, crossing his arms. As the most experienced and blooded ninja present, he was favoring the safest course of action. Rabid dogs may not be at fault for their condition, but that doesn't change the fact that they need to die. I got involved in this mess because I didn't like seeing innocent people get killed. I'm not changing that policy now. If you decide to kill him, I'm taking him and leaving. Cold blue eyes showed the other two in the room that Naruto was all too willing to follow through on his words. And what would you do with him? Ao condescendingly asked. Just wander the world with a paralyzed ex-Mizukage? Sure, Naruto replied confidently, catching Ao off guard. You said the genjutsu has to be refreshed regularly, or the foreign chakra eventually gets depleted. Then he'll be safe even after I take the seals off, as long as whoever put the genjutsu on him can't find him again. A wistful look appeared in the blonde's eyes, as he began daydreaming. The unloved orphan and the former Mizukage, going on wacky adventures together all over the world. I bet the book royalties alone would make us filthy rich. Of course, he knew Kiri would never let the Sanbai out of their grasp so easily, and without a way to make contact with the bijou, he would be unable to gain its cooperation and safely free it from its host as he had Kurama. So many complications. Getting this meeting back on track, Mei interrupted from her desk, casting a significant glance towards Naruto. While letting him live does pose some amount of danger, there are significant advantages to sparing him. Keeping our newest ally content is perhaps the least of them. Seeing the looks of confusion on the faces of the two males, she smiled knowingly. This country is currently torn apart by years of civil war. Getting everyone to play nice with each other is going to be difficult if we just cut off Yagura's head and declare victory. But if we can prove to the loyalists that Yagura never really wanted the purges and was, in fact, being manipulated, then it makes it look like we were the ones carrying out his true will. Ao continued her train of thought once he grasped it. Which convinces the loyalists to back down and makes you the obvious successor for the role of Mizukage. It also has the side effect of distracting everyone from hating each other, by focusing them on an outside threat responsible for trying to destroy Kiri from within. Naruto added content that Mei had found a strong argument for sparing Yagura. Clever girl. Thank you, she answered. But that does bring up one important topic. Who's responsible for this? According to Yagura's preliminary questioning, he only remembers a single red eye, with black markings. Sharingan. Ao and Naruto replied almost as one. Naruto had a passing familiarity with all of Konoha's bloodlines, and Ao vividly remembered his epic battle with the formidable Uchiha Shursui. As I suspected, Mei sighed. But that doesn't really help us identify the perpetrator, considering Konoha's Uchiha clan are all dead. Except for that rogue who killed them all, Ao pointed out, then put a hand to his chin. But why would he be targeting us? What would he have to gain from it? Naruto, knowing more about the rogue Uchiha than the other two, felt a headache come on at the potential clusterfuck. If Itachi was following orders when he murdered his clan, couldn't he be following orders from Konoha now? Was Konoha behind this mess, hoping to profit from Kiri's weakness? Frankly, Naruto's gut was telling him no. Yagura's madness had started years before the Uchiha massacre, at a time when Itachi would have barely even been a genin. Then there were his thoughts on the unknown Uchiha who had controlled Kurama. Assuming an Uchiha of such power had been living among the clan in the first place, would Itachi even have been capable of killing him? Maybe the same Sharingan wielder responsible for trying to destroy Konoha had moved on to try and destroy Kiri. But what kind of agenda would lead a man to try to wipe out two ninja villages? Naruto? Mei brought his internal monologue to a screeching halt. Apparently, she and Ao had been discussing the Itachi possibility while he had zoned out. Shaking his head, Naruto decided how much he would tell them. Sorry about that. I just realized that the guy responsible for whacking the Uchiha was a little young to be responsible for Yagura. I'm thinking there's another one out there. There wasn't enough evidence to support the Itachi hypothesis, and some strong evidence against it, so he wouldn't raise Kiri's suspicions against Konoha. He didn't want to start a war so soon after helping bring one to an end, especially when he could be playing into the hands of someone who wanted both villages out of the picture. Mei rubbed her forehead. I see. So we still have no idea who or why, just that it's a rogue Uchiha. Back to square one. Ao groused. Since I don't think Konoha's surviving Uchiha is even out of their academy yet. Realizing that there was nothing to be done about the unknown Uchiha without more information, Mei decided that a change of subject was in order. At the very least, we can take steps to minimize the danger of keeping Yagura alive. She began, addressing Naruto with her next words. You've proven your competence with seals, and have already used them to subdue him once. Could you come up with a more long-term solution? Preferably one that doesn't leave him bedridden for the rest of his life. I think I can come up with something. Naruto mused, going over the problem in his head. The current seals on Yagura were always active, such that the only way to stop the effect was to remove them entirely. For what Mei wanted, the seals would need to be toggled, preferably at a comfortable distance. But not just anyone could be able to activate the seals, as Yagura would be of no use against Kiri's enemies if they could shut him down too. If anything, Mei would want something like the Hyuga caged bird seal, except with paralysis instead of pain. Someone using genjutsu on Yagura might be able to make him ignore pain. So the same type of seals Yagura already had would suffice, so long as they could be modified for remote activation by a single person. Probably Mei herself. While Naruto disliked the Hyuga's use of such seals on family members, sealing opponents to keep them from becoming future threats was much more acceptable to him. It certainly beat killing an otherwise decent person, which was the most likely outcome in this case, if Mei wasn't convinced that Yagura was no longer a threat. Alright, I'm pretty sure I can whip together a seal array that should do the trick. Naruto exclaimed enthusiastically, rubbing his hands together. So let's talk price. What? Ao and Mei asked in unison, looking adorably confused. How did you think I made a living? Naruto chuckled, clasping his hands behind his head. Nobody's paying me for stealing a kage, you know. My day job is designing and selling seals. I think you'll find my products to be reasonably priced, considering their high quality. I suppose we can work something out. Mei spoke hesitantly, bringing a finger to her lips in thought. Now that the war was all but over, she figured they could afford to offer some sort of compensation to the one who had made it all possible. Glad to hear it. So here's what I had in mind. Port City, Yokohama, western coast of water country. 4 months later. New Year's Day, as well as Naruto's 13th birthday, had come and gone while he remained in water country, and the place was definitely starting to look much better than it had when he arrived. Immediately after the conclusion of that fateful meeting with Mei, she had sent a messenger to Kiri, informing them that the Mizukage had been the victim of insidious genjutsu. The message had also requested a meeting with a loyalist genjutsu specialist on neutral ground so they could confirm Mei's story, promising that the Mizukage would be there, alive and well. Suffice to say, that meeting had shaken things up in Kirigakure. Just as Mei had hoped, much of the lingering post-war animosity was directed outward, at the unknown agent who had forced his will upon their leader. With Yagura's own approval and support, Terumi Mei had been sworn in as Godaime Mizukage and made great strides in reconciling the two halves of her shattered nation. The one responsible for the mess had apparently realized the jig was up, as the last traces of foreign chakra had passed from Yagura's system months ago without anyone showing up to renew the genjutsu. Nonetheless, both Yagura and Mei had been under heavy guard to prevent any repeat occurrences, with Ao routinely checking over both of them. Once Yagura was confirmed free of the genjutsu, Naruto had removed the original paralysis and chakra disruption seals, drawn the revised version, and had Mei apply the chakra activation charge to make her the only one keyed into it. After she was convinced that Yagura was safe, the former Mizukage had been allowed to resume active duty as a jonin and advisor to her. The sight of both of them working together side by side had been another important factor in reuniting the rebel and loyalist factions into a cohesive whole. All in all, Kiri was well on its way to recovery, and Naruto himself had made a tidy profit as the preferred seal supplier of the current administration. It hadn't come as a surprise when Mei tried to recruit him into Kiri's ranks. He would have considered her to be remiss in her duties if she hadn't made such an offer. A commission as a Tokubetsu Jonin was his for the taking, along with a fast track for promotion to Jonin, and a subtle hint that he might eventually find himself on the short list of candidates for Rokunin. But he turned it all down. This war had taught him just how brutal the world of ninja could really be. He'd known it intellectually, of course, but reading about it and seeing it were entirely different things. Even though he'd grown up in a ninja village, and certainly fought like a damn good one, he was starting to feel as though he would forever be an outsider among ninja. His morals simply didn't mesh with theirs, and he felt as though he would never truly belong among them. Even Mei, nice as she was, undoubtedly had the blood of innocence on her hands. She would do whatever it took to ensure Kiri's prosperity. Granted, the average ninja could probably go through their entire career without ever being asked to do anything too unsavory. But settling for mediocrity was also unacceptable, in Naruto's eyes. He had no intention of being just another average ninja. So he had walked away. Being his own boss had advantages, not least of which was that he would never have to compromise. He toured water country for a time, plying his trade, but his wanderlust told him that it was time to move on. So it was that he found himself in the same port city he had first arrived in, trying to decide which direction he'd take from there. Wave was reasonably close to water, and supposedly a prosperous center of trade. Maybe he'd go there next. Excerpt from Abridged History of the Shinobi World, Volume 4. Published in the 683rd year of the Sage, 40 years after Akatsuki's destruction at the Battle of the Five Kage. Kiri Civil War, Third Battle of Kirigakure. Participants: Rebel, future ally. Uzumaki Naruto. Loyalist. 40 members of Kiri Anbu Hunter Division. Duration: 15 days from Anbu embarkation to Anbu withdrawal. Casualties: Rebel: none. Loyalist: 9 dead, 8 severely injured. Total purge team losses: 107 dead, 1 severely injured. Result: Rebel victory. Summary: in the final days of the Kiri Civil War, a third party chose to intervene on behalf of the rebel forces. Though Uzumaki Naruto had yet to make contact with the rebels, he had taken it upon himself to blunt the notorious bloodline purges by attacking isolated loyalist purge teams. After the complete destruction of over a dozen teams in less than a week, loyalist commanders decided to organize an entire platoon dedicated solely to killing him. Unlike the first and second battles of Kirigakure, fought by rebel forces infiltrating the village and attempting to depose the Yondaime Mizukage, this battle did not take place in the village proper. Uzumaki Naruto had been basing his guerrilla campaign in the adjacent woodlands, tracking teams as they left the village. It was in this region that the loyalist platoon engaged him in battle. At this early stage in Uzumaki Naruto's illustrious career, a combined force of 40 of Kiri's best and brightest should have been more than enough to easily kill him. However, he understood his own limitations and refused to fight them head-on, instead making ample use of traps and withdrawing before being overwhelmed. Aiding in his fighting retreat was his use of the infamous Hiraishin Jutsu, the first time the technique would be seen since the Yondaime Hokage's death over 12 years earlier. By instantly moving to distant locations without crossing the intervening space, he was able to evade the skilled trackers and prevent them from exhausting him. In the meantime, his continued strikes against purge teams resulted in the combined loss of nearly 30 such teams before those missions were discontinued. With each skirmish, he managed to elude his pursuers and inflict more losses in the process. Once the platoon was down to about half strength, the commanding officer made the decision to withdraw. While there was some debate regarding a possible court-martial for this failure, the flurry of events over the next few days effectively tabled that discussion. Despite the relatively low number of combatants involved, this battle would prove to have far-reaching implications. The members of the platoon were some of the best the loyalist forces had to offer. The losses they sustained, and the mere fact that they were tied up for weeks reduced loyalist combat power far out of proportion to their numbers. Even more importantly, the battle helped bring Uzumaki Naruto to the attention of rebel commanders. Their cooperation would prove key to bringing the war to a swift conclusion.